And we are live with today's 2/20/11/02 Core 2 A+ study group. We are busy getting things ready here in the studio. This is our pre-show. We start at the top of the hour. So for those of you joining in, we will be stepping through and making sure that we have everything ready to go, ideally, in the next 10 minutes. I think we're in pretty good shape right now. I was just looking through my cameras. They look pretty good. We got all four of them up and running right now. Streaming is at the moment looking fantastic. We've got presentation ready to go. Hello, chat room. Hi everybody. Thanks for being here. Thank you for joining us. We always appreciate you. Thank you for being here. We've got more to step through. Brad says Sunday's the big day for Core 2. Oh, you're taking Core 2 on the weekend. So we're planning. This is the big push towards the Core 2, the final Core 2. Hopefully this will give you some good Q&A. Let's pause our demo there. I don't need to see this. Blah, blah, blah. Dismiss. There we go. So we're in good shape. Let's see. I have a checklist. Where's the checklist? Who took the checklist? The live stream checklist. There it is. Okay. Just before event, graphics are in video switcher. Check. Got the stuff set up there. Yep. Mac is ready to go. Chrome is there. Web presenter. Yep. Okay. We're good. It all works, everybody. My Q&A isn't working. Well, I did change it recently. So if you went there in the last 5 minutes, you probably did not get the right one. You want to clear your cache and try it again. I think you'll be okay. I do podcast intros just prior to coming live, ideally. Sometimes you will catch me on the podcast intro, having to do it during the 10-minute pre-show. But I try to do it just prior to going live because who wants to hear me say, hi, I'm James Besser, this is blah, 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 and we recorded it here, and this is the thing. So instead of doing that and having you sit through it, I don't. I'm the only one who gets to sit through it. Sorry you missed it. Sorry we didn't do that this time. But if you download the podcast, you'll be good. You'll be fine. Okay, next on our list, we'll see what happens to the other pieces. We have a lot to go through today. I've got all new questions, of course, for the Core 2, which is fun. And then the second hour, I open up the chat for questions. Have you submit those questions. In fact, if you want to, speaking of what's going on there, we've got there's our view, our map of the world. So for folks that are checking in from wherever you happen to be in the world, you can do that by visiting the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and kind of see where everybody is connecting in from, which is kind of fun. I like to see it myself, to see what's going on. So that's always useful. Super fun. So we got a lot. You're worried CompTIA is going to expire the Core 2 at any moment. No, I don't. I'm not worried at all. In fact, we have a pretty good idea about dates regarding the current Core 2. And I would imagine at this time next year, we will still have the current Core 2 version available. And we'll talk more about that in the first 5 minutes of the live stream. We talk about all of the estimated retirement dates. So what's important for you to know as sort of the short explanation of that is you've got a year from this point at least. So you should absolutely work towards earning your A+. You can finish your A+ in 3 to 4 months on average. So an entire year, that's quite a bit. So you've got plenty of time for the Core 2. Not an issue at all. And they never suddenly show up one day and say, hey, guess what, everybody? Core 2's over. No, we got a new one here. No, that you have plenty of warning. There's plenty of, even if you're in the middle of studying, they give you generally 6 months once they decide, all right, here's when we're going to retire it, and it's 6 months from now. That's usually how they do it. So not a problem. In fact, it's one of the few organizations that does it that way, which is really nice, I think. Okay, Core 2 is today, though. Core 2. Let's see if I can get the rest of my things set up on this side. We got less than 5 minutes to go. My thoughts on CompTIA being bought out. I'm surprised it took this long. Quite honestly, it's a remarkably successful certification and training program. So of course somebody's going to want to make some hay from that. That makes perfect sense. It's like most things. Most smaller organizations get bought so that someone else can. It was bought by some venture capitalists. I don't think it was VCs. It's more of equity partners. VCs is a completely different world. It was not VCs. So erase that. No, not VCs. It was an equity investment. So it was just bought by somebody who wanted to run it, who says we can do this. In fact, it's from investors that have a well-established track record in purchasing smaller tech companies and continuing to grow them, is what it was. And it's a couple names of companies you've never heard of, but you've probably heard of Blue Coat. You've probably heard of, we should bring up their logo page and see all of the different tech companies that are there. There's certainly some you've probably heard of. The goal with that, of course, is to continue to grow the business like anything else. I think they can see that. And CompTIA was sort of a company. It was two companies in one to begin with, wasn't it? You've got, or it currently is, because the purchase has not gone through yet. So you've got an association. That is the A in CompTIA, is that association side. So associations are very similar to what you might find for different communities of people getting together and discussing what's important in their particular fields. They can use that to lobby for better protections and more growth and better coverage of their association followers and community. So there's that entire, we don't usually talk about that on our live streams because we're so focused on the other part of CompTIA, which is quite honestly their much larger part, which is the certification side. So what they're doing is sort of taking the certification side. Now someone else is going to run that piece of it. And then the association, which I assume will have a different name after the purchase is done, that association will continue to exist and continue to do what it's always done. So it makes sense to me. There is one truth, one standard thing that constantly happens, especially in the IT industry, but it really happens in every industry, is there's constant change and constant growth and constant acquisitions. And it's if you were to search for M&A, mergers and acquisitions, there are companies that are built that all they do is facilitate mergers and acquisitions. It's just a standard part of business. And I look forward to whoever's watching, when you're thinking about M&A, think about I'm not selling anything at the moment. I'm just happy to be here, people. I'm just glad to be in front of the camera at this point. We are just getting through every day, and I'm happy about that. So that's why I'm happy you're here as well. We got about a minute and 15 seconds to go before we get started. We'll get things going here. I basically don't think anything's going to change right after acquisition. There will be obviously things that the companies that purchase and their management team will want to do to increase their perspective, their training offerings. But I don't think much is going to change functionally, certainly not from a naming perspective. I think they're keeping all the same people in place. So I think it will be a very boring transition. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe they'll surprise me, but I don't think so. They got a good thing going and they know it, and they're going to keep that party going. That's how I would approach it if I was in charge there. Why in your channel is there no join button? I don't know. Got me. That's a real question for YouTube. But if you go to professormesser.com/live, you can join right there. Why is there no join button? Maybe I got the times wrong. No, I'm on there now. I'm live, so you should be able to join in. Join in the fun. Speaking of join in the fun, it's the top of the hour, everybody. I think it's time to do a live. I didn't have a hiatus. Where did I go? What happened? That would be nice. When that happens, please let me know, because I am super interested in everything you're talking about there. We'll figure that out, but not right now. We have a live stream to do. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 2024 Professor Messer 2201102. That is the Core 2 A+ study group. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm James Messer. I'll be your host for this first hour of Q&A, where I will ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And in the second hour, I will open up our Q&A forum so that you can ask me a question. Kind of turn around everything. We go from me asking you to you asking me. Now, the way that we would facilitate that, the way that you can participate along with us, is we would love it if you joined in. The way that you can do that is to pop open a new browser window and head over to this URL, professormesser.com/QA, and that way you can join us, answer questions. There's a lot of interactivity that's there we can work through. And of course, if you're watching this live, then you already have the chat available. We've been talking to the chat online already in the pre-show. We always turn this thing on about 10 minutes early for those of you that watch this on the video replay. You missed the whole 10 minutes, unless you sit on the video replay of 10 minutes, because I do keep it there. But one of the things that I like to do, first off, now that we have popped into the system and we are now at a prompt where we can answer questions, I want you to get in here and answer a question. So I have for you a question from last month, or at least a previous study group. This is what I call my rewind question. It's really for us to get things going, make sure you can get into the Q&A and answer questions properly. The question that I have for you today is one that I need to change it on my side too. I believe this is the right one. We're going to open this question and get this particular piece going. Whenever I start working on my my Q&A that I have here, I always have a question from last month, and I try to pick one that maybe we didn't all know it really well. I have a feeling we knew this one pretty well. The question asks, a technician has modified the source code and compiled a new version of a network utility. Which of the following would best describe this software? Would it be, get my head out of the way, would it be FOSS, EULA, NDA, concurrent, or perpetual? Now, our rule for these questions, our big rule throughout the study group is please don't answer the question in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to answer the question. Submit your question there, and we're going to come back to that question in just a bit, and we'll see how well you did with that particular question. Somewhere in this first hour of the study group, I will provide you with instructions on how you could earn 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. If you don't know what that is, then this probably doesn't apply to you. But if you've already been certified in not only CompTIA, but perhaps other certifications as well, there's a need to keep that certification current. And one common way to keep that currency is to have a continuing education unit, continuing education, so that you are always learning the latest and greatest things. That way we can keep all of your certs up to date. Just listen in during the first hour. It'll be pretty obvious when we get to that point, and you can follow along with us from there. One of the things that we are going to talk about today is the A+ exam. We already had a question about some of this information in the pre-show, so I think it's important to go through it. We are today specifically talking about the 2201102 exam. I'm missing my pretty graphic there. We'll have to fix that. The release date for that exam was April the 20th of 2022. And since these exams tend to stick around for about 3.5 years, that means that the estimated retirement for this particular version of the exam is November of 2025, which means as we sit here in November of 2024, if you do the math, we have a year. So if you are currently studying for your A+, or you're thinking of studying for your A+, this is a perfect time to do it. You have plenty of time to go through and study all of your study materials, study for your certification. You'll be well certified well before that retirement date ever shows up. And in fact, I highly recommend you do that. Having that certification in your pocket is much, much, much more valuable than somehow waiting around for, I don't know, retirement date or some other version or something else. So the important part is that you get that certification and get it as soon as you can. The exam itself for the 1102 has a scale from 100 to 900, and the score that you're hoping to get is a 700. So there is a little bit of work we need to do to make sure that we reach that particular passing score. Now, as I mentioned, even though the exam that you're taking retires in November of next year, once you pass the exam, the certification is good for 3 years. Really doesn't matter what they do to the questions on the exam during that time frame. Once you've passed the 2 exams, you're good for 3 years, regardless of what changes they happen to make. In fact, it would be very unusual for somebody to go back and take another set of exams again after they're already certified. That almost never happens. I guess mostly because it's relatively easy to maintain your certification and keep it updated that way. Much more difficult to go back and take the exams again, but I guess you could if you really, really wanted to, right? Today, we're going to talk about the 22011-02 exam. This consists of topics around these domains: operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, and operational procedures. So we will step through different questions on this first hour dealing with those 4 different areas, and those come directly from the exam objectives. The video replay of this will be available immediately afterwards, but I do have an audio replay of this available that I distribute in podcast format. So the podcast listening program that you have on your mobile device, maybe you listen on a streaming service such as Spotify, we're in all of those places. You can add us to your favorite podcast listening program by searching for Professor Messer or simply visiting professormesser.com/podcast. On the YouTube side, one of the things that you will notice is that sometime during this first hour of the study group, or during the first 24 hours that the study group is posted, you will see, almost like magic, there's a series of timestamps that will appear. Those timestamps are provided by my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this in the replay. Hey, Lori, how's it going? She is going through and listening probably at 2x speed and going through all of this and putting down these timestamps. We have years of these that you can go back and listen to and study for your A+ certification. This is something that can help you find exactly what you're looking for and find it very, very, very quickly. When we're not doing a live stream, you probably want to head on over to our Discord, where myself and thousands of my friends are hanging out and studying for our certification studies. We have plenty to go through there, even a way that you could start your own private study group or public study group. Let people come in. You can manage it. You can have people present information on their screen. You can all watch the same video together. It's a great place to meet up with people who are studying for exactly the same thing that you are. And you can study together and bounce ideas off of each other and ask questions of each other. It's a great way to do it. And it's a really nice community of folks that are over there in the Discord. I try to stay out of the way and let everyone do what they do, but I also hang out in there most of the time anyway. Find out more about that at professormesser.com/Discord. Eventually you're going to need to take your A+ exams, and the A+ exams can be purchased on the CompTIA website, but why would you pay full price on the CompTIA website when a discounted version of the same voucher is available at professormesser.com? It's a great place to go. You can go to professormesser.com/vouchers, and if you are in the US, Canada, or a US territory, you can purchase those vouchers from that page. Also, if you purchase from that page, I give you something that you can't get anywhere else, and that's a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is an ebook that has tips and tricks that I've compiled over the years where you can have better tasks for your studying process. I even give you some tips that could even help you get extra points during the exam itself. Find out more about that by purchasing the voucher at professormesser.com/vouchers. Exam Hacks is not sold separately. You can only get it by purchasing a voucher or purchasing one of our success bundles. So a little bit of exclusivity for you. I also would like to now go back to that original question we asked to see how you did with that one. The question asks, a technician has modified the source code and compiled a new version of a network utility. Which of the following would best describe this software? Would it be FOSS, EULA, NDA, concurrent, or perpetual? Which one is it? Let's close the poll and see how you did. Looks like a number of you got in here, and I think a number of you remembered the answer from last month. We did really well with the answer here because 67% said the answer is FOSS, F-O-S-S, and that is the correct answer. Well done. 16% said perpetual, 7% said concurrent, 5% said EULA, and then 3% said NDA. So when we talk about FOSS, we are really referring to a free and open source software. So a lot of the software that people make available on the internet for free, not only are they making the software available for free, they're often making the source code available for free, which means you can view it, you can change it, you can recompile it, you can do whatever you'd like with that software as long as it complies with the licensing that was created by the original authors. And very often on the internet with FOSS, many of these licenses allow you to make any changes you would like to that source code and compile it yourself. There is commercial software, of course, that you could purchase. If you were to purchase, say, Microsoft Word, they do not give you the source code. When you purchase Microsoft Windows, no source code for you. That is commercial software. It is pre-compiled for your system, and you don't have access to any of that information. Some of you answered EULA. EULA stands for an end-user license agreement. And when you install a new piece of software and that message pops up that says, please read this, and you don't read it, you just scroll to the bottom and you click OK, you just skipped over the EULA. You skipped over all of the legal requirements that are being expected of you for someone who is using that software. The end-user license agreement is an important legal document, and I would recommend you at least scan through it, maybe a little bit, and become familiar with what's in there. Pretty important if we are working through the details. So that is why, if we look at the answers here, free and open source software is the right answer. It would not be EULA. We know why now. NDA stands for a non-disclosure agreement. That is an agreement between two or more entities that makes a statement that no one's able to talk about what you see here. Everything we talk about is private. We do not disclose it. It is a non-disclosure. The concurrent and perpetual refers to a type of software licensing. The concurrent and perpetual do not apply to someone who is modifying source code and compiling new versions, so that's not going to be what we're looking for in this case either. So that is our initial, let's see how we do with our rewind question, and I would say you did pretty well, because 67% is a very good number. And the answer here, of course, was indeed free and open source software. Well, now let's shift gears a little bit, because I want to give you new questions. Our first new question of the month is what CompTIA calls a performance-based question. Sometimes you'll hear this called a PBQ, performance-based question. The performance-based questions are effectively anything but a multiple choice question. So it could be fill in the blank, it could be a drag and drop, it could be a matching question, it could just be any type of method of asking you information that effectively you already know, because even though it is asked in a different way, it is still topics that come directly from the exam objectives. So if you know the exam objectives, as I often say, it really doesn't matter how they're going to ask the question of you, you will know the answer. So I have for you today a performance-based question, a brand new one that you have not seen before. So a lot of folks have said, we want more hands-on performance-based questions. So I created for you a hands-on performance-based question that really you could almost do without hands-on. I think you could probably step through this if you visualize it in your mind. But if you have a prompt available, you normally don't have this during an exam. But sometimes they do present you with a front end and give you a chance to type away at the command prompt. Here is your performance-based question of the month. I want you to perform really 4 different tasks. I want you to first create a subdirectory named backup in this current directory. So you can see I have a directory here called users, professor, documents, and I have performed a directory to see what is in this particular one. So let's look at this real quick before we continue with the Q&A in this one. You can see that there is really only one file that is located in this particular documents directory, is a file called employee-data.xml. So in that directory, and looking at it, I want you to create a subdirectory named backup in this current directory. What would you type in to make that happen? Secondly, I want you to copy the XML file, the one we just looked at, copy that file to the new directory, that new backup directory we just created. Once you do that, I would like you to confirm that the file was actually copied. And I often do this. I know I copied it. I just copied it in the previous version. Why do I need to confirm it? Because sometimes you would like to be able to see it and make sure it was copied properly, because the next step, we remove the original file. That's why we're confirming it. So this would obviously be a a series of tasks and 4 specific commands that I am looking for you to submit at the prompt that you see using the link at the bottom of your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Step through and give me what 4 commands would you use to be able to do this. Now, it could also be more than 4 commands. There's different ways to accomplish this, but I will step you through the answers for this. I will definitely step you through and make sure that you are having a look at what we think the right commands might be for that particular question. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, submit what you think those 4 commands would be, ideally with the entire command prompt that is right there. In fact, what I should do is probably start up my Windows. Maybe we can even do this interactively. I have screenshots of this just in case I have a problem typing, just in case I have an issue with my keyboard, which is really all the time. That is where we would focus on those things. So we will step through each one of those and see if we can step through this command prompt and see what the differences might be for this. See how you do. I'm starting up my VM on a window to the side here. You can't really see it where you are, although now we can hear it. Let's turn off some audio. Thanks, Windows, for doing that for me. And I'm going to pop open my command prompt, and we will simply... I think I still have the file that is still in my documents directory. I think I do. And do I? I sure do. So I am going to, I should probably move the whole VM over. There we go. So once we are done with that, I will pop back over to the VM that I have here. I have effectively, there it is in my prompt. There's a users professor documents. There's the employee data.xml, and we should be able to step through and see how that works. Submit your answer. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you could submit your answer at any time. A number of you have already submitted your answers. Oh, a lot of good stuff that is going in here. We'll have to figure out. Oh, and a lot of you are spot on with what you would do with this. Although it's very interesting. Some of you are even typing some things in as I'm looking at this that look very familiar to what I typed in at the very beginning. We'll talk about how my mind works. I don't know, maybe we shouldn't. We will talk about how my mind works when I move between one command prompt and another, because sometimes it goes a little bit crazy. We'll work through the details of that. Submit your answer. I'm spending a little bit more time on this one because this one is a little bit more time consuming, but do not worry. I will make sure we get through all the questions we need to get through today and have all of those work. Now that we've had some time to have a look at this, you can see that most of these commands are effectively commands that allow you to operate just basic file management functions. These are capabilities that, in the case of Windows, it's built into the operating system itself. So everything that we're doing here, creating a subdirectory, copying an XML file, confirming the file was copied, and removing the original file, those 4 things are using built-in commands. You don't have to install a particular kind of software. You don't have to install PowerShell. It's just built into the operating system. So that helps too. So at least as you're going through this, you know that everything you need is already in Windows and ready to go. So let's see if we can do this. I am going to bring up that Windows prompt. The first thing we want to do is to create a subdirectory named backup in the current directory. That is the first step in our mix of things that we would like to do. So let's pop over to my Windows prompt here. There is the directory. That is exactly the one that we would like to look at. In fact, as I stepped through this particular directory, one of the things that I was working on or working with is trying to give you the right mix of commands to use. I want this to be very practical. So all of the commands that we're going to use in this one do come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. I wanted to be sure to stay on point, on task with this one, and this one certainly does. So the first step, again, as we step through this, is to create a subdirectory named backup in the current directory. Well, there's a couple of different ways to describe this. If you wanted to type it completely out, we need to make a directory. MKDIR is short for make directory. For those of you that don't want to type that much, you can also do an MD. Both of those will work in this case. And the name of the directory that we needed to create is called backup. So we will simply call it backup. There it is. Now, if you wanted to see if it really did that, let's perform another dir command. That's a directory listing. The dir command, as you can see here, well, not very easily because my head's in the way. Come down here. The dir command shows us that we do indeed have a backup directory that was created because we used that md command. So that was very, very useful to be able to make that. Now we have a directory that we could move this or at least copy it to. We didn't want to move it. In fact, it tells us specifically that we would like to copy the XML file to the new directory. Oddly enough, to be able to do this, let's kind of clear the screen with the CLS. I'm going to give you another dir so you can kind of see what's going on here. And the way that we would do this, the way you copy a file in Windows is use the word copy. Not really a reach on that one. The file that we would like to copy, the format for the copy command is we need to specify the source of what we are copying and the destination. Well, in Windows, a file and a directory, very similar to Linux, are simply objects that we can reference. So we will say that our source in this particular case is the employee data file. Now I could type in EMPL and we could just type the whole thing in, but since we are in Windows, and this is very similar to many operating systems you find, there is a tab completion function. So I'm just going to hit the tab button. And it already understands that since I typed in EMP, it already knows there's only one option that matches that particular one, and it filled in the rest. You could type it all in yourself, of course. And we need now the destination of where we are copying it to. We could type in the entire file path, which would be c:\users/professor/documents/backup. And we would have to get all of the uppercase and lowercase right in some cases. Or we can simply type just backup because it's going to take our current directory and it's going to look for anything that's in our current directory and copy it to that particular location. So that's a very simple, quick way to make that happen. Otherwise, and this is perfectly reasonable as well, you could do this. In fact, it's very clear when you do this. You could say users, professor, documents, there we go, backup, and there's another way you could do it. Now, if you just want to do it quick, so if you're sitting and somebody's looking over your shoulder and they're asking, why are you typing this whole thing in? You could just type backup and it would do that. And you can see here, it tells us one file copied. But did it really copy it? And did it copy it with the right name? Did I type something in wrong that maybe caused it to copy it with a different name that happened to be there? Well, then we need to shift over to the third thing, which is to confirm that the file was indeed copied. One quick way to do this is to perform a directory. We could simply perform a directory of backup using that same syntax we used earlier. This is a directory of the backup directory. And you can see inside that backup directory, oh, it did copy correctly, employee-data.xml. Everything worked exactly the way we would have hoped. Everything looks fine. There's nothing unusual there. This looks like, and we can confirm that everything worked perfectly. I'm going to perform a CLS command. Well, we don't need to do that. We'll just keep it exactly where it is so we can see everything on the screen. The last thing, the last bullet that's here, is to remove the original file. Now, normal people would just say to delete the file, but I felt if I said delete the file, you would know what the command was to delete the file, which is, unsurprisingly, the delete command. So I'm going to perform a directory of my current location of where I am, which is users professor documents. I'm now going to use the del command for employee data.xml. I use my tab complete again. And when I hit enter, it doesn't say anything. It's one of those commands that just silently works. When it works, it works. When it doesn't, it will tell you that it didn't. But how can we, just as a little bonus, let's check to see if it really was deleted. I'm going to perform a dir command again, and you can see that the only thing left in that particular directory is the backup directory that we created. There you go. That is the command prompt performance-based question of the month. Well, interestingly enough, I did peek in at a number of different submissions that were made. And a lot of you made exactly the same errors that I made when I was putting this together. because I said I wanted you to confirm the file was copied. Well, one of the things a lot of people did, let's go back to my command prompt here. A lot of the things that people did is they do what I do. Oh, you want to see what's in the backup directory? We need to do a listing command. I like to do an ls-la, a listing command, a backup. Let's have a look. Oh, wait. Oh, no. That did ls is not recognized as an internal. That is a command that is included with the operating system itself, or an external command. It's a separate executable you would need to have installed on the system. It's not an internal external command. Operable program. Thanks for putting operable program in an error message, or batch file. And you're right. The ls command is the file listing command in Linux. So we're on a Windows operating system. So obviously the ls command by default is not going to be available. So sorry that didn't work so well in that particular case. That's the way things go. Some folks in the chat room going, wait, I'm on a Mac. Well, I am too. But you should run a VM. Go grab a VirtualBox, load up a Windows machine. Get familiar with that too. In fact, if you are planning to do anything in IT, learn as much as you can about Windows, learn as much as you can about Linux, learn as much as you can about Mac OS. Knowing the three of those will position you very well for really anything that is thrown your way. That is our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully that gives you some perspective of what we're doing. And if you are in Linux, it is a completely different set of utility programs. A number of those are very different. The copy command, for example, in Linux is CP. If you were wanting to simply move, you could use the MV command. To delete something is RM for remove instead of DEL. So there are differences between these, and make sure that you are familiar with those differences between the Windows and the Linux commands. You will be asked about all of those, or potentially could be asked about all of those. They are certainly in the exam objectives. Make sure you are very, very familiar with the differences. And if you're like me, I mentioned in my brain, whenever I'm moving from a Linux command prompt to a Windows command prompt, which I'm constantly doing during the day, I'm always typing in ls in a Windows prompt. I'm so glad the ls command doesn't do something horrible in Windows, or we would be in really bad shape, because I type it in all the time. So those of you that put ls on your system, that's okay. That's perfectly normal. It's wrong, but it's perfectly normal. It kind of explains a lot about me and my life. It's wrong, perfectly normal. So let's, now that we've got our performance-based question behind us, hopefully you did very well on that one. And based on the submissions I saw, you certainly did. Let's now shift gears a bit and go back to our multiple choice based questions, which I could do if I had them up on my screen and ready to go. This is the beauty of the live prompts, though. For those of you, you can see the things that we did. I just made screenshots of exactly what we just did to be able to make those happen. So become familiar with the command prompt. It might come up in your exam. Next, let's do another question then. Let's kind of focus our efforts on, since we're talking about Linux, we weren't talking about Linux. Since we're now talking about Linux, let's have a Linux question. This question asks, a Linux user needs to combine multiple text files together into one single document. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Would it be cat, dig, top, yum, grep? Those don't sound like real things. I'm just saying. The question again asks, a Linux user needs to combine multiple text files together into one single document. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is it cat, dig, top, yum, or grep? If you think you know the answer, please know answers in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA. That is the link that is on your screen to lock in your answer. Please know answers in the chat room. Please know hints in the chat room. We'll figure out the details with all of these as we go along. This is also a good task. Since we just did the Windows command prompt, I thought it would be good to kind of shift gears back over to the Linux side and see how we do with the Linux command prompt. Sometimes we need a little bit of additional help with Windows and Linux, and this might be a good one to try as we step through it. So, How well do you know your Linux? A lot of people submitting this one very quickly, so I feel like that is the case, that we are doing exactly this. So let's see how we did. The question again asks, a Linux user needs to combine multiple text files together into one single document. Which of the following would provide this functionality? Is it cat, dig, top, yum, grep? A lot of 3- and 4-letter words in the Linux you find just all the time. That Linux and Windows, they look so familiar, and yet they are very different between all of these. What did you choose, though? We'll stop the poll. 54% of you say the answer is cat. We have 26% of you, though, that say the answer is grep. Is what you would do. And then single digits. 8% said yum, and 5% said dig, and another 5% said top. So all of these, by the way, are real commands. I didn't make up these words. It seems like I did. I did not. These are real commands. So being able to understand the differences between all of these is going to be important, because this is the type of question that you might get on an actual exam. They don't really ask you questions such as, what does the top command stand for? What does it do? Instead, they give you a scenario and they ask you, what would you use in this scenario? Which I think is probably a good approach to focusing on those. So I think if you're familiar at all with Linux, then you're probably also familiar with cat. There's the cat. Cat is not about a kitty cat. Cat is about concatenation. So any opportunity to throw a cat into the mix, I guess, is fine too. The concatenation means that we are going to link objects together into a series. And especially when you're in Linux, and even in Windows, there are different ways to do this. This is one of many ways to make that happen. The way that you would use the cat command is you would use cat. You would specify the first file that you would like to have in the output, and then you specify the second file that you would like to have in the output. By default, Linux shows you the output on the screen, or the default output object, default output device. If you wanted this to be concatenated into a separate file, you may want to use a redirection at the end that redirects the contents of this particular command. We use a greater than sign. You can see the arrows kind of pointing this direction. So we say, take everything that's on this side of the greater than and put it into a file on the other side. So send everything over and redirect it into that particular file. So one way that you could take the contents of file1.txt and file2.txt and put them all in a file called both.txt is to use this cat command with that particular syntax. That is exactly what we were hoping for. In fact, 54% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. We did get over a quarter of you said the answer was grep. Grep is a tool that's primarily used to search through a file, very small or even very large. It's a very fast search tool, and you can look for a specific type of text or input in that file, and it will certainly be able to find it. I use grep all the time, especially if you have an enormous log file and you're looking for a specific IP address. You can grep the IP address from that file, and it will show you all of the lines inside of that log file that only have that particular object in it, only have that particular IP address, which is really, really handy. And it works very quickly, but it doesn't combine text files together. So grep would not be what we would use. We would also not use yum, which sounds delicious. Yum is a utility for, in many Linux distributions, yum is a utility used to install, update, or even remove different packages. It's called in the world of Linux, in that particular part of Linux. If you are looking for a particular application that you would like to install, very often it's done using yum. Very often it might also be done using apt or apt-get. Both of those are in the exam objectives, so something you might want to know. We also have top, got 5% of the vote. Top is a utility that shows you the performance of your system. So if you're trying to figure out how much of a resource is being used, Top will show you that. Top's kind of like the task manager for Linux, if you will. It shows you what applications are running. It shows you all of those executables. It shows you how much memory they're using, how much CPU they're using, the disk I/O, lots of information in Top. It's a great place to get a feel for how's this system running right now. And then lastly, we have dig, which sounds cool. Dig, it's groovy. You know Dig. The Dig utility is a very useful one to use for querying DNS servers, the domain name system servers, but Dig is not going to be something that can really help you very much if you are trying to combine multiple text files together. Won't help you at all. In fact, if you are trying to combine those multiple text files together, the answer here, the only one that really makes sense, the only one that will do what we need to do, would be to go to the utility for cat and be able to use that. And the 58% of you that chose that one got it absolutely correct. Let's do another question. Next on our list is this one. And it asks, a network administrator has configured UPnP, whatever that is. Which of the following would be associated with this change? Would it be authentication required for network access, static IP address assignments, filtering of inappropriate content, server access from external clients, or visibility of wireless network names? A little bit to choose from there. A network administrator has configured UPnP. Which of the following would be associated with this change? Authentication required for network access, static IP address assignments, filtering of inappropriate content, server access from external clients, or visibility of wireless network names. If you think you know the answer, please lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA and locking in that answer. Should be a good one to look through. See if you know what the answer is for this one. See if you happen to recall. First, we would have to know, this is a very common tactic, by the way, on the exam, is the question itself is not completely written out. There are very often abbreviations, acronyms, the summarization of information, and we have to know what those acronyms mean and how they are used to be able to answer this question. So it's a multiple step to get you through this one to figure out what the answer happens to be. Again, if you know the answer, lock it in at professormesser.com/QA. Again, the question asks, a network administrator has configured UPnP. Which of the following would be associated with this change? Authentication required for network access, static IP address assignments, filtering of inappropriate content, server access from external clients, or visibility of wireless network names. Let's see how you did with this one. We will close the poll. Ooh, we're all over the place on this one, and we did not get a majority. But if we go with the plurality of you, 40% of you said that server access from external clients is why UPnP has been configured. But a quarter of you say the answer is authentication is required for network access. That's why we configured UPnP. 12% said visibility of wireless network names, 12% said filtering of inappropriate content, and 8% said static IP address assignments. Only one single digit on that one. Well, let's talk about Universal Plug and Play. That is UPnP. Universal Plug and Play is a bit of a network service, really. It's a service that is designed to give us access over the network. And if you need to have a router, some type of system that is providing filtering, some type of security system, many of you know that nobody's allowed access into your network because the firewall, which in your home would be a firewall wireless router type device. In your enterprise, it's a separate firewall. Whenever you're working with those, one of the things you'll notice with that firewall, it doesn't let anybody in. That's the point of having a firewall after all. But sometimes you do want to let people in, especially if you've set up a server on your own network. At home, you might set up your own web server. You might set up a gaming server. You might have some service that you would like a third party to be able to access. This is exactly the scenario you might go through in an enterprise as well. You might have a web server internally or a different service internally that external people would like to be able to connect to. So this is a very good example of what you often see written out as zero configuration, because what UPnP can do is recognize that you have started up a service. That service talks to your router or your firewall and says, hey, I'm a new service on the network. I've just started up. And since we both talk universal plug and play, open up what the port numbers that I need to allow people from the outside to come inside, but only to this service. So it's not opening a complete open network. It's not opening everything to the world, thankfully. It's only opening a particular service for the thing that you happen to be using at that time. So that's a very good example of how this automation that we have built into these protocols can make things easier for people that are starting up these services. Now, if you are a security person, this is awful. This is horrible. Why would you allow someone to gain access to your network without you specifically granting them that access? Because of that security concern, it's not always a security issue, but it's certainly something that you should be concerned about. A best practice for most organizations is to disable anything related to universal plug and play. So that is why when you're talking about UPnP, that it really is something that you might want to consider not using, but understanding how it works perhaps gives you the perspective of why that might be important. Universal plug and play would allow server access from external clients. 40% of you chose that option. That is the correct option, and you got that one absolutely right. A lot of you chose other options, though. 25% of you chose authentication required for network access. If you've ever had to log in to gain access to a network, you're not logging in with UPnP, you're logging in with 802.1x. Another one. 802.1x is a completely different standard dealing with a different set of protocols, does not have to do with UPnP. 12% of you said visibility of wireless network names. That's an option that's usually enabled in your wireless access point. The access point itself allows you to enable SSID broadcasts or disable SSID broadcasts, and that visibility of network names would come from that. Has nothing to do with UPnP. The filtering of inappropriate content, usually that is a URL filter or something very similar that is built into your firewall. Sometimes it's built into a proxy or third-party device, but that is not associated with UPnP. And static IP address assignments, often we can perform static assignments manually. We can configure them based on a DHCP server, but none of this has anything to do with UPnP. The only option here that has anything to do with universal plug and play is server access from external clients. This is one of those situations in our industry where we've created a little bit of confusion. In fact, if you've ever seen that there is a Java programming language and there is a JavaScript scripting language, those are two languages with the word Java in the name, and they are completely unrelated to each other. So we've sort of done the same thing with universal plug and play. Back when all of this was created, there was a need to be able to make it easy to install different adapter cards into computers. And if you've ever installed a new adapter into your computer, you don't have to set a lot of switches on the card. You don't have to set the memory settings. You don't have to set interrupts. In fact, there's almost nothing you would set on a card that you would install, an adapter card that you would install into a computer. Whenever the latest version of Windows was released that automated this process, so we didn't have to change any switches and settings on a card, the update to that and how the operating system automatically made those changes and allowed you to make the changes in software rather than hardware, that particular functionality was referred to as plug and play. Not PNP, but plug and play, all spelled out. Plug and play was an important step in the evolution of making the user environment for personal computers so much easier to use and upgrade by practically anyone. Unfortunately, we also introduced universal plug and play, which has nothing to do with the hardware plug and play. So don't get too confused over the names. Whenever you see UPnP, it's talking about being able to configure and set up your network so that it would allow access through a filter or a firewall. That's what we are referring to there. Well, as you can already tell in this particular set of questions that we have already stepped through, there is a lot of information in this set of exams. For the Core 1 and Core 2, when I put together the entire course, You can even see here that the course is 137 videos over 19 hours of content. And as much as I would like everyone to watch all 137 videos, I recognize that sometimes you just don't have the time, or maybe you'd like to skip over certain topics that you already know. But wouldn't it be nice to have everything that's in that particular video already documented for you? And I've created a series of notes that does exactly that. These are my course notes. These are the ones for the 2/20/11/02. This is the PDF version that you see on the screen. So all of the text, all of the charts, all of the important graphics, all of the command line details, they are in this set of notes. I also have a physical version of the notes available. It's a printed version that you could get as well. And when you get the printed version, or what we call our physical edition, you also get the digital edition PDF for free along with that. So you've got a few different options for working through your studies and trying to get all of that information in one place. Hopefully this has given you an option as well. And I have both course notes available for the Core 1 exam and the Core 2 exam. You could certainly buy them separately, but when you buy them together, there's a little bit of a cost break, something to think about as well. And if you do get the physical edition, I will be shipping this to you. Not this one, because this one's mine, but I will be shipping a copy to you. And in the meantime, you will have immediate access to the digital download. The second you purchase it, you can download it immediately from the website. If you'd like to learn more about that, find out more at professormesser.com/1102notes. Let's do some more questions, though. This next question on our list is a malware question. It asks, a technician has identified symptoms of malware on a user's computer. Which of the following would be the best next step? Would you disconnect the system from the network, discuss the issue with the end user, turn on system protection, start the computer in safe mode, or run an anti-malware scan? All of these things should be done at some point during the malware removal process. That wasn't our question, was it? The question was, a technician has identified symptoms of malware on a user's computer. Which of the following would be the best next step? Would it be to disconnect the system from the network, discuss the issue with the end user, turn on system protection, start the computer in safe mode, or run an anti-malware scan? If you think you know the answer, there's your link. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know which one this one would be. Can be useful. This is someone in the chat room saying, will the A+ and networking lectures become outdated when they switch those around? Well, you certainly always want to study from the version. Your study materials should always match the version of the exam number that you're planning to take. So as always, for those of you that know, we go back, this will be we did a 600 series A+, 700, 800, 900, 1,000. We're on 1,100 now. So you will actually see when a new version of an exam is introduced, I will also have a new set of videos for you. So you're never without that content. But of course, we're talking about the current version still being around for a year. So the idea of thinking about a new version and should I look at we're way before worrying about any of that right now. So fortunately, you don't have to worry about it. In fact, many of the people that are on this stream would like you to wait, because they're going to get their certification now and go get the job, and you're not going to be able to compete. So that's what they're hoping you do. I'm hoping you don't. I'm hoping you take the exam as soon as you can, get the certification and put it in your pocket and go out and get that IT position. That's what I think is a good idea. The idea of waiting has always concerned me a bit. There are times when you might want to think about waiting, but almost never. The only scenarios I've come up with that why would we ever want to wait to get certified would be that something else was going on in your life at the time. Well, that makes perfect sense. But for those of you that are currently in the middle of this, and I would imagine many of the people watching this live stream would be there, and you're thinking about how can I get a job? How can I get a better job? How can I improve the qualifications when I show up for those positions? How can I learn more about these technologies? That's your A+. You should be working on this right now. So I would highly recommend talking about that. Some of you are even asking, what is that new exam going to look like? Well, maybe we'll talk about that in the after show. So stick around for that. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a technician has identified symptoms of malware on a user's computer. Which of the following would be the best next step? Would we disconnect the system from the network, discuss the issue with the end user, turn on system protection, start the computer in safe mode, or run an anti-malware scan? What did you answer? 73% of you say you would disconnect the system from the network. 17% of you say you would run an anti-malware scan, and then it drops completely off to 3% of you saying turn on system protection, 3% of you saying start the computer in safe mode, and 2% of you saying discuss the issue with the end user. 73% is a pretty strong number saying you would disconnect the computer, that system, from the network. And in fact, the instant that you even think there might be malware on a system, the best practice is to always quarantine that system immediately. You would disconnect it from the network. Some people are even saying, what if it's a vital system that couldn't be immediately disconnected? There is no such thing. If it has malware, you are disconnecting it. There is much more damage that could happen from that system continuing to be plugged in than the value that you're currently getting from that so-called vital system. So make sure you take the malware off of your system as soon as possible, because you don't know if this is malware that's able to replicate itself. You don't know if this is malware that was placed there by a bad actor. You don't know if someone is attacking your network currently. You don't know if somebody has been in your network for a very long period of time. This is one of those cases where, especially if it's a vital system, there's going to be a lot of questions for you afterwards. Why was this vital system not protected? How did the malware get on the system to begin with? If this is such a vital system, how did we put it in that particular situation? Maybe these are questions we should ask now and figure that out. So that's how security professionals are going to look at that, and that's the way you should look at it as well. So disconnect it from the network right away. If there's any type of media or network connection, you should disconnect it. So if there's an external drive, if they're USB drives, unplug them. Just prevent that malware from spreading. You want to capture and limit the scope of that infection. So make sure you disconnect, disconnect, disconnect. That's the important part of this, so that the malware has nowhere to go. There will need to be a lot of people visiting that system, looking at the data that's on there, determining how that malware got on the system, how to prevent it from getting to any of your other systems. And then if it is something that is nefarious, then you'll need to perhaps perform other tasks as well. You know, it may be time to call the FBI. Sometimes we do that in the world of IT security. So an important one to consider. But for you, if you think there's malware, your best practice, the first thing you should do is indeed disconnect the system from the network. 73% of you got that one absolutely correct. Running an anti-malware scan, you will get to that point eventually, but you could be running your anti-malware scan while you're connected to the network, giving the malware an opportunity to hop to another system. That's not what we want. So we're a little bit running too far ahead of ourselves at that point. First, let's disconnect. Then we can think about doing other things. And running an anti-malware scan happens a lot later. A lot later, actually, in the whole list of things. Because one of the things we may want to do is disable system protection on our system so that it deletes any of our saved points, our restore points that we might have in our Windows system, because we don't want those restore points to be restored. And then because the malware has gotten inside of those restore points, you're effectively restoring all of those connections and the malware itself. Don't restore your malware. You want to delete the malware. So that's why turning on system protection is one of the last things you do, along with discussing the issue with the end user. This is an important step, of course. We need to help understand why the malware got on that system, talk about the process they went through, and then explain to them how next time, do this. Call me, open a ticket, don't click that particular link, whatever it happened to be that caused the malware to get on that system. And then starting the computer in safe mode may or may not be part of the malware removal process. A lot of organizations don't have a formal malware removal process. They capture the data, they may image that system, and then they will either replace the entire computer and take the system back to their lab, or they will re-image the system with a clean, known, good image and just delete everything. So it is a take and destroy everything on that system, make it a clean slate. That way, you know, the malware for sure 100% has been eradicated because you completely imaged that entire system. In this particular case, as soon as you see the malware, disconnect the system from the network, and 73% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you're watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you are here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU, continuing education unit. The way that you would earn that is to follow these instructions. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, and from there you would click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, please put your name, your email address, and in the subject line, please put November 2024 Core 2 or something close to that, so I know where it came from. And in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code word of the month, which is turn on system protection. That's your super secret code words of the month. You have to put that in the email message itself. Don't put super secret code word, quote unquote. I get a few of those sometimes. So don't put the words super secret code word. Put the words turn on system protection. That's what I'm looking for. That way I know that you were here, you were listening, you know what the code word is, and they're different every month. So I know that you were here for the November 2024 Core 2. That is what you would want to do. Again, go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, put November 2024 Core 2 or something close to that. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the words turn on system protection. If you'd also like to put other words in there as well, you'd like to send me a note. I do read through every single one of these. I'm the one that receives all of these messages, so I'm more than happy to go through and read through them, and I enjoy that. So thank you for sending those. I'm not always able to reply back to every single one, but I do read through every single one, so thank you for sending those. I know we have a little bit more time left, and I have been talking a lot in the study group. So let's do another question. This is one that came up in one of our chats this week, so I thought it would be good to put it in the study group. The question asks, a technician has used a month of daily backups to create one backup containing all data. Which of the following would best describe this single backup? Would it be incremental, snapshot, synthetic, image, differential? It's got to be one of these, right? Those are all real things. They're all real backup types, all from the exam objectives. The question again asks, a technician has used a month of daily backups to create one backup containing all data. Which of the following would best describe this single backup? Is it incremental, snapshot, synthetic, image, or differential? If you know the answer, there's your link. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. That's what we want to determine. Backups is an important part of this. You hear me constantly tell you to have a backup. Do you have a backup? Have you made a backup recently? Do you have an automated backup process? If you leave it to yourself to manually click a button to back things up, then you're already losing. We don't do that. We forget. We don't have a way to do it. And many of our operating systems these days either have built-in backup processes or very well-established backup systems that we can download and use. So find a backup method that works for you. Make an investment into some type of backup media. An external drive these days, terabytes of an external drive, relatively inexpensive. And if you think about how valuable your family pictures are, if you think about how valuable your spreadsheets might be, your documents that you've created, the information that's on your system, imagine what life would be like if all of that information was gone. Makes me tear up a little bit. Makes me nervous just talking about it. So on my systems, it backs up every hour. I have a process, goes through, finds everything I've updated, updates that one. It's built into the operating system. So find something that's similar for you that you can always just know that it's running. And every once in a while you can check on it. Is it still working? Yeah, it's still working great. Great. It does it automatically. It's updating all of that for you in one single place. Let's see how you did with this question. It asks, A technician has used a month of daily backups to create one backup containing all data. Which of the following would best describe this single backup? Is it incremental, snapshot, synthetic, image, or differential? Let's close the poll and see how you did with this one. Oh, we're all over the place, which actually, interestingly enough, we were pretty much all over the place in the chat. We were discussing this. So this is a pretty good representation of where I think most of us are with this particular topic. This is a relatively new topic. It's something that was introduced in the Core 2 exam. So not unusual to think about and figure out how it fits in this particular scenario. 30% of you chose incremental, 26% of you chose synthetic, almost a tie for those two. And then we have 17% that say image, 15% that say snapshot, and 10% that say differential. So whenever you are taking these updates every day, you are constantly performing updates of these systems. It's very unusual for someone to take a full backup of a system every day. But if you've looked at our backup video, you know that restoring from a full backup is a relatively simple process. Everything is in one place. You only need one backup to be able to deal with it. And it happens relatively quickly because it's simply copying down everything that's in one big backup. When you have incremental backups, which is what you often do when you have daily backups, you have these incremental backups that occur. You're simply taking a change. I mentioned to you that my backup happens every hour. That's an incremental backup. It's incrementally backing up the changes. So at the end of the day, I don't have one backup. I have 24 backups. Now, if I need to restore that, I would need to take all 24 and work my way all the way back until I finally have everything that I need. That's a little bit kludgy. And if any of those 24 backups is damaged, then I've really got a problem because I'm not able to restore everything properly. So in this particular case, incremental best describes the process that was occurring on the network every day. Taking these incremental. You could also do a differential backup as well. Both of those are very common for daily backups because they don't require you to perform a full backup every day. Full backups take a long time because it's a full backup. It's everything on that system, and it does take up a lot of space, which is why we don't just simply do a full backup every time. But full backups are great to have. Well, how could I take all of these daily backups I've created and consolidate them down into one big full backup? I'm not taking a full backup, but I'm sort of creating one kind of in a Frankenstein sort of way. I'm putting all of these pieces together and taking out the old stuff and keeping in the newest stuff to create what effectively is a full backup. And we refer to that as a synthetic backup. It is a full backup, but it's something that we've not taken a full backup. We've simply created it synthetically based on the information that we've already backed up throughout a period of time. This is a very good example of this, where you would start with a full backup, and then there are these incremental changes that occur every day. Well, if you wanted to summarize everything back into a full backup, we simply examine what all of those changes were. We keep the latest versions of those, and we create a brand new version of a backup without having to perform a backup. It's the best of both worlds. It's fast. We don't have to worry about spending more bandwidth. We don't have to worry about capturing and having more storage space. Very effective, very efficient, and it gives us a quick way to restore if we ever need to. That is a synthetic backup. It's a very useful backup strategy. There are other options here that we could have chosen, and other options that provide a similar functionality. So we need to know the differences. For example, we've already mentioned incremental, differential, and synthetic. 17% of you said an image is what that is. An image is commonly done from a system that you want to be able to take any point in time, capture exactly how that system is set up with all of the files, all the operating system, everything at that particular state, and then you put that image aside. It's sort of like performing a full backup, but to a different format, which includes the operating system, and includes everything that happens to be on that particular system. Whenever we need to restore that image, we pull that image file out, we plug it in, and it restores the entire image. We don't commonly update images on an hourly basis, however. It can be done, but it's not very common to do it that way. Images are sort of like having a good starting point. I mentioned whenever a system is infected with malware, we often use an image to completely delete everything on that system and start from a clean slate. So you can think of an image as that clean slate. It doesn't always have to be, but it's very commonly used that way. From the same perspective, if you're on a virtual machine, you can push a button that tells that virtual machine management service, take everything that's in that VM and make a copy of it for me, just temporarily. We refer to that as a snapshot. It's almost like an image, except you're sort of taking it as you go. Often we do snapshots whenever we're going to perform a function. We're going to upgrade the operating system. Let's take a snapshot. And if we need to go back to that version, we can easily go back to that previous version of a snapshot. It's almost like a super image that we can just constantly create this. In reality, it's sort of an incremental backup. We're simply updating this, except it's part of the virtualization software. But it doesn't take a month of backups and create one single backup, at least not directly, although there are some virtual machine managers that can do that for you. They can perform a synthetic or create for you a synthetic backup based on all of your incrementals to kind of clean things up if that's what you want to do. So this is used in many different scenarios, but the term that you're looking for is indeed synthetic, and 26% of you got that one absolutely correct. That is the right answer. Synthetic is what we were looking for, and that would give you that full backup without having to take a full backup, which is kind of nice to have that there. Great utility to have in mind, especially if you're going to be in charge of backups. You need to understand what all of those different options are and what the ones are that you would be able to use. I know we're at the top of the hour, but I have one more question for you today. I want to be sure we get through that, at least the questions that I ask. You're going to have many more questions for me, I am sure, as we step through this. One of the things I find, though, is as I look around the internet and I look at questions that are out there, there is a variety of quality. And most of it's low. There's a lot of low quality questions on the internet. Let's face it. There's just a lot of questions out of scope, out of date, or just completely wrong. And when I noticed this, I thought, well, we need better Q&A. Q&A is an important part of our studies. It's that final step that really helps us understand if we're ready to take the exam. So our questions should be the same quality as the exam. It should have a similar feel as the actual exam. It should have a similar tone as the actual exam. So I thought I'll write some. And that's what I did. I sat down and created a series of practice exams that has the same distribution of questions and topics, the same style, the similar format, a similar voice, if you will, as the actual exam. And I put it into a single document. These are my Core 2 practice exams. This is actually my Core 1 book that I grabbed, but it's a similar book in size, 380 pages, lots of questions, lots of answers. And I have for you a question from my practice exam. So let's just dive into the practice exams book. I have for you a question from the practice exams, question A64. This is on page 22. It's from practice exam A. And the question asks, again, no answers in the chat room, please. It asks, a malware infection has recently been removed from a computer. When starting the operating system, Windows shows errors during the startup process, indicating some core operating system files are missing. Which of the following should be used to restore these missing files? Is it GP update, WinVer, SFC, or diskpart? Now, this is a PDF. So you're able to annotate this if you want to. If you're using this on a tablet, you could use your stylus. If you're using it on your Windows or Linux or Mac OS system, you can use whatever PDF reader you would like to use. It's a PDF file, so you can use it on practically any system. And you could go through this list and say, well, I think it might be this one, or maybe it's something else. Maybe I think it's that one. You can change however you would like to annotate this particular view. Also, because it's a PDF, I have these notifications right here that says if you just want to know whether it's A, B, C, or D, you can go to page 33. Right now we're on page 22. So you'd have to scroll to page 33. It's even worse if you want more details about this question. You have to go to page 100. Imagine scrolling over to page 100, but it's a PDF. So I put a link in the PDF that takes you to that page. In fact, if you highlight over it, my PDF reader even tells you if you click that, you go to what is page 109 of the PDF. And in fact, if you click it, boom, you're on page 100 already. There it has gone. At the very top, it shows you the question again, and it tells you that the answer is C, SFC, and it explains why that is the right answer. The SFC, notice whenever there's an abbreviation in my practice exams book, I try to spell out every single one of those abbreviations so that you don't have to constantly remember what that refers to. It's a good part of the learning process. But part of the problem I run into is that I always get the question wrong, but the answer page never seems to tell me why I got the question wrong. So in my book, every single wrong answer is documented. So if you answer GP update, I explain to you why GP update is not the right answer. If you answer WinVer, I explain to you why that is not the right answer. If you answer disk part, I explain to you why that is not the right answer. So you get this full circle. You get someone closing that loop for you. If you got it wrong, now you understand why you got it wrong. And hopefully, in my mind, helps you understand why the right answer is right, why the wrong answers were wrong, but perhaps more importantly, prepares you for those particular topics on your exam. I'll even tell you that if you are going through these books, you already have these practice exams, and you get a question right, spend a couple moments reading through the wrong answers to make sure that your reasoning behind why it was wrong is really the right reasoning. And that might help you if you get some of these wrong answers showing up as right answers on your actual exam. Another important thing to consider. Also at the very bottom, if you have no idea what this question was about, or you don't understand some of these options that are available, I put links down here to the videos that describe this particular topic. So you can fill in that particular loop of all of these. That is in this particular case, it's Objective 1.2. It's in my Windows Command Line Tools video, and I give you a link right here, both a QR code and a direct link that you can click on that takes you to that page. Once you're done here, maybe you'd like to go back to the list of those. There's a back button. Did you know your PDF reader probably has a back button in it? Not all do, but mine certainly does, and most of the big ones do. So I'm going to click the back button, and we're back to where we started. Even still has my annotation there on the screen. Those are my practice exams. Gives you an idea of how you can approach each one of these particular challenges with exams. Test yourself, see if you know these topics, see if you know the abbreviations, see if you understand the way that CompTIA might present these topics to you on an actual exam. Maybe that can help you as well. You can learn more about that one at professormesser.com/core2PE, or simply follow the main menus on the Professor Messer website. I mentioned that all of the topics we went through today came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. This is a very important document, and it's free. Most importantly, it's free. Perhaps even more important than any of these, it's free. And it's available on the CompTIA website. So this gives you a list of everything you need to know to pass this exam. I have a copy of the objectives right in front of me. There they are. Here are the Core 2 objectives for the 1102 exam. It gives you an overview of the exam, a list of the domains and the percentages that are expected to show on the exam. And then they break down for you every bullet of every topic that you need to know. They are in the exam objectives, pages and pages and pages of these bullets. And in the back of the objectives, as I go page by page by page by page, a lot of pages here of things you need to know, they even give you an acronym list. So if you're trying to figure out what those acronyms are, they summarize it right there for you so you can remember what those are. Some of these I don't know that we really use that much, but they're listed in here. You've probably heard of a CAPTCHA before. That's that funny little image that you have to type in to prove that you're a human. We've made it a little bit easier in recent years. But did you know that it's called the Completely Automated Public Turing Test to Tell Computers and Humans Apart? I don't think I've ever said that out loud before. So that is a very good example. Turing tests are pretty useful. This is a very long acronym to be able to refer to that, but that's what it means. We just never use that. So although I tell people be familiar with these, some of these we don't actually use in practical terms whenever we're communicating with other human beings anyway. Might help you if you're working through the details of that. Those objectives are available for free. You can find a link over to the CompTIA website at professormesser.com/objectives, and that will get you over to that location. I do one of these study groups for Core 1, Core 2, Network Plus, and Security Plus every month. Our next scheduled study groups for this will be a little bit earlier in the month. You'll notice in December, we tend to do our study groups very early on the holiday season and everything. So we make sure we get our A+ done. They're currently scheduled for December 3rd and December 5th. We also have Network Plus on December the 10th and Security Plus on December the 12th. But we still have Network Plus and Security Plus for this month. If you're interested in attending those live streams, you can always find out when the next available live event will be on our calendar. Go to professormesser.com/calendar. It's a great place to find out when the next one is going to be. Hopefully that will help you if you're watching this video maybe 6 months later. You're wondering, well, when's the next event? It's on our calendar. Go to professormesser.com/calendar. Well, my first hour of Q&A is done, but we're not done with questions and answers. I want to take your questions that you ask of me. We do that in our after show that's coming up immediately after this. Stay exactly where you are. Don't move an inch. We'll start up in just a minute or two. We also have our course notes and practice exams available on our website. You can find that at professormesser.com/1102success. Our vouchers are also discounted. You could pay full price on the CompTIA website, but why would you do that when I have discounted vouchers available at professormesser.com/vouchers? And of course, find your favorite social media site, put a professormesser.com right in front of it, and you can find us on that site as well. Professormesser.com/Discord is our chat and 24-hour access to our community. We have professormesser.com/Twitter because that's its name. We can talk about that. professormesser.com/YouTube and professormesser.com/Instagram. I think I might have put an X on there as well. I think I might have a professormesser.com/X because you can't fight that. You have to go with it whenever they present it to you. There's also daily pop quiz questions available on our Twitter/X and our Instagram. So another great place to go. And our LinkedIn. I don't even have this on the page, professormesser.com/LinkedIn. Well, stick around for our after show coming up immediately after this. Thank you so much for being here in this first hour. It's always fun to go through the questions and see how we do. And maybe we've learned something and prepared ourselves a little bit better for our Core 2 exam. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Core 2 A+ study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay, now with that, if I can get rid of my big head that's there. There we go. We need even bigger. Hi, everybody. Let's take a sip. One moment. That is got to get me through the next hour. So let's now step through how you can participate in this after show. The after show is not really a formal show that I do. It's more of a way to answer questions that you might have. So I haven't really prepped anything. Really, most of this is coming from you. And the way that this would come from you is to be able to ask a question from me online. You can do that by going to the same link that we've been using this entire time, professormesser.com/QA. That is not the page that I would like to show you. I'd like to show you what you would see if you went to that. And that's what you would see, is that you can submit questions for this second hour at any time. The questions go back into my big list of questions that I have. So I will go through those and kind of mix through what you are submitting, figure out the things that you are interested in talking about. We can certainly address those. I will start sifting through that list of questions right now. You've already submitted quite a few already, so thank you for doing that. And if one comes to mind as we are talking, you can always go to professormesser.com/QA and use that tab at the top of the page to flip over to all of those. Let's start with a question that is a good follow-up to showing you the exam objectives we looked at just a moment ago. This is, as I've mentioned, from one of my favorite people, Anonymous, who says, on the exam objectives for Core 1, same thing for Core 2, there is an acronym list. I noticed some of them, those acronyms, weren't covered in the videos. So should I only know what they mean, or should I know how they function? This is a common question. This is a common challenge. So let's go back to those acronyms and really get a feel for what's there. I'm going to bring up a single page for these, and let's really just kind of look through these acronyms. This is the one for the Core 2, but the same thing applies. This is something that is a bit of a challenge because I have found that not all of these acronyms have a direct relationship back to the exam objectives. The exam objectives are listed earlier in this list, but there are a number of acronyms that you will find in here that really aren't mentioned anywhere. I'll take a good example of this. BIOS, for example, the basic input-output system of your computer, is a popular topic on the Core 1 exam, and certainly I would expect to see that acronym on the Core 1 list of acronyms, but we really don't cover BIOS very much in Core 2, do we? So it's odd that it's in this list, given it really doesn't show up as part of the exam objectives. So I would say from a broad perspective, knowing these can be useful, and the bulk of them, I would say the vast majority of these acronyms do tie back to a specific exam objective. And because of that, and the fact that it's difficult to point out which ones really apply and which ones may not directly apply, that I think maybe going through all of them wouldn't be a bad idea. These acronyms themselves, to the rest of that question, is more than just some abbreviation and the words. So for instance, knowing that basic input-output system, BIOS is basic input-output system. Basic input-output system is BIOS. You would think that that's all you would need, right? That's your flashcard, right? BIOS on one side, basic input-output system on the other. But what is that? What does that do? The name itself doesn't even directly tell you what it is. You would have to already have some knowledge of what a BIOS is, how it is used, what you would use it for. Those are important considerations. So I would tell you that you really need at least 3 things on your flashcard if you're looking to memorize these. You need to know what the BIOS, what that abbreviation is, BIOS. You need to know that's the basic input-output system, but then you also have to know, when would you use that? How would you implement it? How is that technology used in a normal environment? Let's take another one, for example. ADF is automatic document feeder. When would I ever need to know that? Well, you would need to know that if you have a printer or some other scanning system that's able to take documents in through an automatic feeder, put them on the flatbed scanner, it scans that particular page, and it spits it out. You also see this on copy machines. You also see this on a number of printers. It's able to pull that in. So you could put a stack of papers there, hit the go button, and then walk away. And the automatic document feeder will continue to feed that through. That's the context you need. You need more than ADF means automatic document feeder. Because by the way, you will never get a question on your exam that sounds like this. You'll never hear this. What do the letters ADF stand for? You're never getting that. They're never going to ask that of you. The CompTIA exam is much more nuanced than that. Certainly not going to give you a gimme like that one. And simply knowing automatic document feeder, as we've already talked about, doesn't actually help you from a technology perspective. Nobody's going to be in a meeting and say, oh, by the way, what's ADF stand for? They're going to say, we've been having a problem with the ADF on the 3rd floor. We think it's something related to the feed, the feed rollers. Okay, I guess that's right. I'll go look at the ADF. So you need to know what that is already, so you're not blindsided in the middle of a meeting when somebody starts to talk to you about the ADF or the DMARC configuration, or is that system configured with ECC, or are you worried about ESD in that particular environment? We use these acronyms constantly. Do we use them too much? Absolutely. We absolutely use these too much. We are constantly using acronyms. But I think every industry has its own set of acronyms. We're not really much different from that perspective. Imagine if you are in IT in government, you got way too many acronyms. So I can appreciate that. I can understand why maybe acronyms is not really your thing at that point. Maybe that's just too many, and you wouldn't be wrong from that perspective. Let's have a look what other questions you might have. You can submit your questions at any time with the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Use the tab at the top of the list. And we'll have that one there. We've got a couple that have come in. Some of these I was able to answer during the live stream itself. How nice of you to send the update in telling me, oh, you answered it. Thank you. So we'll skip over that one. That was a question about the retirement dates. When should we look at that? I think we've gone through that one a couple times in this particular live stream. Let's keep going through the questions that you have submitted. So here is a common question that I get. This is also from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, on some practice exams, it asks for an exact button click to navigate to a certain area inside of Windows 10 or Windows 11. For example, it'll show me variations of control panel / network or internet / internet options / privacy with minor differences. And that's when you want to put a brick right through your monitor. Will there be questions like this on the exam? Should I memorize the exact paths of specific features? Well, anytime you're working in any operating system, you need to know where to find things. So there's a practical side of this, certainly, that if you need to modify a particular feature, you need to know where to find that option to be able to modify it. But the exam does not go into a lot of nitpicky type questions like this. I have also seen similar practice exams and practice questions on the internet and from other sources that for some reason get into the weeds. They're a little pedantic with the amount of detail they are expecting you to be able to regurgitate. I will put you a little bit at rest that the actual exam does not go into that level of detail. But they might ask you, you need to modify a user's local password on a Windows system. Where would you find that? And you need to know the name of the utility or the name of the function within Control Panel that allows you to get there. But it won't ask you, what things do you click on to be able to get to that point? I think everyone is pretty clear that if you know that it's in the users section, that you could probably figure out, you could probably navigate there eventually. You know where the endpoint is there, and especially in Windows these days, you know how you find the users section in Windows? You go to the search and you type in users and you hit enter. That's how you do it. Are we even sifting through all of the different menu options and click on settings? No, it's in Control Panel. Where in Control Panel? Is it in the administrative? We don't do that anymore. Instead, we just go to the search and we search for applications, and it brings up all of the different options, and you click that one. And CompTIA knows this. Of course they know that. We know how people use their computers. So CompTIA doesn't worry about you going through these different navigations to get down to where we need to go. Don't spend your time on that. Spend your time knowing where the end point is that you need to get to. Where is that final location that you're looking for? So they can ask you a question about, you need to collect a lot of statistics from a particular system. Maybe you need to collect memory usage on a system over a 24-hour period. Where would you find that? You need to modify the proxy settings for the browser inside of Windows. Where would you find that? Those are the types of questions that you would be more apt to see on an actual exam. They're not going to be interested in knowing if you know what to click on the screen. Same reason that on the core one, they don't ask you how many pins are on a certain type of memory. Nobody knows that answer because nobody cares, because you buy memory based on the type of memory, not the number of pins that are on it. But there's still practice questions out there asking you about the number of pins on memory for some reason. I don't know. They do it. I think it's much more important to find a set of practice questions you can trust, a set of practice questions that are built for the current version of the exam, and practice questions that stick to the same format and style as actual questions. And if you find those, you're doing fine. That's why we wrote our questions to begin with. Let's do some more questions. Speaking of questions, let's get them from you. Here's a question that has nothing to do with certification. How about that? That's what you want during a certification, but I said you can ask anything you would like. I don't know that I will answer anything that you ask, but I like questions that go off the beaten path a little bit. This is from Chris. Chris says, hey, what are your streaming computer specs? And the answer might surprise you. The answer is actually, I don't have a streaming computer. I sort of do, but I don't. The computer that I use for streaming, let's see, do I have output on here? I do, but when I show it to you, it's going to show you a picture of a picture of a picture. Now that you know that that's coming, it's not going to be a problem for you. So I'm going to keep my picture on the screen so you could see this. So sort of a picture of a picture, but if you ignore everything that's in the middle of that picture, you'll be fine. So on the left side is really what I wanted to show you, where it says Professor Messer live stream, and then it has all these statistics and information about this particular view of this. And no, you don't get to see my whole key. I knew that prior to putting this up here and working through the details of this. That is a technology, a piece of hardware from a company called Blackmagic Designs, which my parents don't like because it sounds like it is of the devil. Black magic. That's not what it's from. These are not anything dealing with the occult, I promise you. But they are a very, very popular media company. They make a lot of great media products, and a lot of the products that are on my desk and what I'm using for this stream come from Blackmagic. My video switching, can't really see it very well because I'm in the way. This video switcher that's in front of me is a Blackmagic video switcher. The streaming device, you just saw it on your screen to my left here. That is a Blackmagic. That is the output from a Blackmagic streaming hardware device. Specifically, the device that I have, we might as well bring up their list of products on their website. And they even have a section here for streaming and encoding. Let's click on that one. The one that I am using right now is this one right here called the Blackmagic Web Presenter 4K. This will output and present a 4K stream. Not that expensive either. It's sort of like a computer, but all it does is streaming. Think of it that way. I purchased this one. I used to use a lot of different streaming software, OBS and commercial products as well. But they always have things that didn't work well for me, or the video card would get updated and then it wouldn't stream properly, or the OBS had to be updated and I had to do a software upgrade. I felt like that was too difficult. I just wanted to sit down, click go, and have my stream going. And that's what does this for me. I can sit down, click go, and it will stream all of that. Let's see if we click on it, it'll give me more detail. In fact, there you go. That's what you just saw, was that view that you get just has an HDMI output in the back and sends that HDMI output into this. They have a version that does not do 4K. It's a little less expensive, and a 4K version. I am using the 4K version, but only because I want to be able to update and have 4K streaming later on. You may notice, in fact, that the stream that you are seeing right now and the one that is saved over on the YouTube side is a 1080p stream. That's because this is an interactive event, or at least the first hour is very interactive, where I ask you a question and I want an answer. The 4K takes about 20 to 30 seconds for them to re-render it and put it and send it down to you in a specific format. And when we're on this live stream, 20 to 30 seconds is a long time. So when we do a 1080p, you are seeing this video 5 to 10 seconds after I send it, relatively quickly. If I can snap my fingers that way and mess up all of the audio that I've created for this live event. That is how I approach these. And I think it's a good approach because then you are seeing it very quickly, and I can always upgrade this later on and work with that. It does work quite nicely to be able to have that. The final stream is sent into that device either via HDMI or SDI, which is a serial data interface. It's a video format that's very commonly used for commercial type environments like this one. So that's why I also chose that, because I can just send it a video output. It takes it from there. And it works so well. I've tried other hardware streaming devices in the past from other companies, and there was always a glitch, or it didn't know how to handle errors properly, or once it ran great if your network connection was great, but anytime there was any type of issue, it would all just fall over and you'd have to restart everything. The Blackmagic products are just solid. They just work really, really, really well and very reliable. So we've stuck with that one for a while. That should answer the question about streaming computer specs, which is there aren't really specs to share other than it's sort of a purpose-built appliance, and it works really, really well. Let's do some more. I'm not a spokesperson for Blackmagic at all, and not all of their products work really, really, really well, but that one certainly does. Most of their products do work really, really well, which is why I use them. I just want to be able to have a solid and consistent streaming experience for you. I do need to upgrade my streaming server, my streaming panel that I'm using here, not the server, but the video switcher that I'm using, which is now a relatively outdated. It's one of their first 4K streamings or video switchers. But I need more functionality. There's a few extra features that I would like to have. I just don't know if I want to buy those extra features yet. So it's one of those situations, being able to work through what might be there. Other questions. I'm sorry to laugh at the question. It's not a funny question. It's a perfectly reasonable question from Natalie, who would like to get a little bit of insight into what happens when we're not doing a live stream. And Natalie asks, do you watch any movies/shows in your free time? I'm sort of like the Countess, where what is free time? I do not know that term. I'm not aware of what that term is. What is a weekend? I do not familiar. It's like the people where you gift them that it's a wine bottle stop. Like, what do I need that for? It's that situation. Like I'm never in a situation where I would need something like that. Either we're not drinking wine or drinking all the wine. One of those two situations. So it's one of those situations where I rarely watch a movie. I rarely watch a show. I almost never watch anything sporting related. That just sucks way too much time because I have to create content. You know, we are a company, we are a business. We have to keep this whole thing going, and it takes a lot of time to create content. If you've ever spent any time talking to YouTube content creators, authors, they're constantly creating content. They're constantly editing. They're constantly in the lab. They're constantly creating some new idea. They're constantly getting it on video. They're having to shoot. It's the same thing here. CompTIA updates these exams constantly, and so we are constantly creating new content. So I can't say there's anything specific. It's tough, though. There's certain things that if you do walk by a television and certain things are on, you want to stop and watch. But I just don't have a lot of spare time to do that. I guess off hours, I do like spending time outside of the studio, outside of the home, so we can get up and go somewhere and have some fun. Go have a nice meal, go where I'm in Orlando, go to an amusement park, go do something fun for the day. The idea of kind of focusing on I do some gaming, something where I cannot be directly connected to a computer, but be in more of a fantasy type thing's a great idea. And hopefully one day I'll be able to have more time for those movies and those television shows. Currently, though, I wish I did, but thank you for asking anyway. At least it gives me an idea of where I might want to be someday, of watching something, just sitting there and passively watching and enjoying some entertainment. That would be nice. Let's keep going with your list of things. We do have time left. Be able to have that there. Other questions. This is a pretty good one because I think it really speaks to how the exam has changed over time. The CompTIA exam is not a single exam. As I mentioned, I'm working currently on my 7th iteration of a CompTIA training program. So as we have changed from one CompTIA exam to another, they've changed the way they ask questions quite a bit. They've changed the style of the question. They've changed the type of questions that you would expect to see. I don't know that it will always be this way, but Rico asks, scoring question, for the questions that have select all that apply, do you get credit for the correct questions? Do you get nothing right? Is there a partial credit option in there somewhere? Maybe. Fortunately, there are not a lot of questions, if any lately, on the exam that are select all that apply. I still see those on Cisco. I still see those on Microsoft these days. I haven't seen them on a CompTIA exam, or the ones that I have seen are multiple. Normally you get a choice between 4. Sometimes they do say select 2 out of this list. They give you a number. I don't think I've ever seen a select all that apply. It's always been a number. And if you end up not selecting the right number, it even tells you, well, whoa, I asked you for 3. You only gave me 2. So it does give you some feedback. I don't see a lot of questions like this on the exam anymore, however. For the same reason, they've changed some of the formatting of the questions. I don't think I have seen recently an actual exam question that asks you for the negative. This is a question, for example, which of the following would not be a best practice for malware removal? I don't get a lot of not questions on the exam anymore. And I think those are unnecessarily difficult to work with, because you're working with a positive in every question, and then suddenly the question wants you to turn around and be a negative and then go back to positive. And I think CompTIA realized that. I know nothing about by the way, I have no insight into the exam writing process at CompTIA. I have no insight into their philosophy of questions. This is only what I have been able to gather based on my research entirely. So this is my perspective that I'm handing over to you and sort of what I see broadly. As far as select all that apply, I don't see any of those. And we don't know if they say select 2 of these 7. We don't know if they give you partial credit on the multiple choice questions. We just don't know. And they haven't told us, and they're probably not going to tell us whether we get partial credit or not. The only time we've ever gotten any feedback from CompTIA about partial credit is a frequently asked questions that is on their site about performance-based questions. The performance-based questions, frequently asked questions from the Department of Redundancy Department. We've got on here a question at the very bottom that says, is partial credit given if I answer part of a performance-based question correctly? Remember, there's only a handful of performance-based questions that you would even possibly get on your exam. The answer is interesting. The answer says, there may be questions, I put the B in there, there may be questions for which partial credit is offered. Well, I guess that means there may be questions for which partial credit is not offered. So that's not very helpful. It does say, however, exam questions and their scoring are confidential. So we're not telling you anything. That's basically the answer there. The answer is they could give you partial credit, but you may not get partial credit. You may not get partial credit, and we're not going to tell you whether you get partial credit or not. It's simply something that they're not willing to disclose. But at least they have disclosed, maybe, in some circumstances, perhaps we might be interested in giving you the partial credit. However, we're never going to tell you when that happens. What I would highly recommend for those of you worried about partial credit, non-partial credit, this is very common. It's nice that they at least gave us that information, by the way, because Microsoft, Cisco, AWS, Amazon, other companies will tell you nothing about their grading process. So fortunately, we do have that option here to at least know that it's a possibility. They've given us at least a little bit of insight into the grading process, but I'm not surprised they didn't provide any more detail. They really shouldn't. I don't think it helps very much to be able to provide that additional detail. And ultimately, by the way, it doesn't matter because there's no way to know whether you got partial credit or not. You'll never know. Don't waste your time or spend your time trying to reverse engineer the grading process and what you think you would need to answer to get a passing score, because there's no way to know. There's no way to validate it. There's no way to reverse engineer it. You could be right. You might not be right, but you'll never know either way. So my recommendation would be to study the exam objectives, do the best you can on the exam, and then whatever the score is, the score is. You don't really have any control over that, any insight, any way to calculate it, any way to reverse engineer it. There's nothing you can do. So I always say the things that I don't have any control over, you just release those into the universe. You just let whatever happens with that will happen. And the rest of it, we'll do the best we can over here. If we do our job, really doesn't matter how they grade it, because I'm going to pass the exam anyway. And that's, I think, the best approach you should take. Other questions. Let's keep going with this. Let's see if I can find other things that you may be asking. This is one that came up earlier. And so in the chat room, let me follow up that. In fact, it kind of fits this next question we're going to talk about. Follow up in the chat room was, are you saying that if we're studying the exam objectives, we should be okay? That is not only what I am saying, that is what I am highly, highly recommend every single person do. Go get the exam objectives. They tell you everything you need to know. Everything. The exam objectives are such a valuable tool because CompTIA sticks to those objectives like glue. They very rarely, if ever, deviate from those objectives. That means that if you study the objectives and you know every objective, you're passing your exam. That's how close they stay to these. Why other training materials go off the path of the objectives, I don't know. You should ask them. Why other training materials are asking questions that have nothing to do with any of the objectives, I don't know. You should ask them. Because none of that is going to show up on your exam. The only thing that's going to be on your exam are the topics that are listed in that very detailed set of exam objectives. By the way, CompTIA is one of the only training providers / certification entities that provide you with that level of detail about the exam itself. You should absolutely take advantage of this because when you're ready to take a Cisco exam or a Microsoft exam, you're going to be looking around for their exam objectives and they're going to give you a half a page bullet of here's what's on the exam. That's not going to help you. It's going to be a very broad overview. So enjoy this while you can. Get those exam objectives. They're very, very, very valuable. In fact, if you were to look at the exam objectives, you'd be able to see information on what you would be expected to know. And Anonymous asks, is most of the information usually carried over to a new exam when the current one expires? One of the things that's interesting that we found through the years is that whenever CompTIA updates these exams, about every 3.5 years, when they update them, they update the objectives themselves. It makes sense. Of course, you're going to update the exams. As we know, in technology, things change constantly. New versions of Windows are updated, new hardware technologies are released, new software technologies are available. You've got changes in the cloud, you've got changes with AI, you've got changes with virtualization, you've got updates to hardware technologies, you've got new storage technologies. There's a lot that can change in 3 years. And so CompTIA always updates their exam objectives so that the topics that are in the exam are technologies that you would reasonably be expected to find if you walked into anybody's data center. In fact, it confuses me sometimes. I'll see online that people will say, oh, that CompTIA exam's so outdated. I took it 10 years ago, so that exam is outdated. The exam that's today is nothing like the exam was 10 years ago. You should go look at the new exam, brother, because it's all updated with the latest things in it. You can't point to anything in the latest exam objectives and say, nobody's using that. No, those technologies are active and used all the time on today's networks. So about this question, we've already mentioned earlier in the study group that the A+ exam will be updated sometime in 2025, and the current version of the exam will be retired probably in the November timeframe of next year. So you got a year before that exam goes away. But what are they going to update? What's going to be new? Through the years, I've told you this is the 7th iteration that I'm currently working on. They tend to update about 20 to 30% of the exam. So that's a good bit of information that you need to have updated. What's interesting about the version that will be coming out next year, though, is Windows. Windows is the interesting part about it. During the last 3 years, we had this thing happen where we all sat inside for a year or more. We all had to not do anything useful, functional. And although we want to say we were remote and we were as effective and as efficient, more efficient than we've ever been, except you'll notice that 3 years ago, Windows 10 and Windows 11 were out. Now, 3 years later, Windows 10 and Windows 11 are out. Wait a second. There's no new, usually in 3 years, we have a new version of Windows. For the first time in forever, in the last 15 years, we don't have a new version of Windows for the updated version of the A+ exam. This makes it for a very interesting update process for your Core 1 and Core 2 because, well, it makes it very interesting for me because I need to create a new course for you, but that new course is not going to have a new version of Windows in it because there is not one. One does not exist. So what's kind of nice about this next update, in a way, for us that are test takers, is that the newer version of the exam, there will be updates, there will be changes, there will be modifications. Some things will be thrown out, some things will be added. But having looked at the differences already and performed the analysis, I can tell you that the differences are very small in comparison. Relatively speaking to previous exam versions, the amount of changes are probably cut in half. Now, there's still changes, there's still things you need to know, and you'll probably still need to have the latest version of study materials available, but it won't be quite the dramatic, quote unquote dramatic. 30% isn't necessarily dramatic, but it won't be the 30% that you may be accustomed to. It may be closer to 15%. Just so you're aware of that. But there will be changes and there will be a great deal of information that carries over. Probably more information will carry over than ever before. But now we know that there's not going to be a new version of Windows. So if we've memorized everything about Windows 10 and Windows 11, we know where we would go to find our user applet. We know where we would go to find our performance monitor. We know where the event viewer is. They're all in the same place. So that is one good thing for people that do get trapped, quote unquote, trapped in that end of the road where an exam is retired and maybe they didn't have enough time to take both exams and now they have to shift over to the newer version. It's not going to be a huge shift for you, or at least it will be a much more reasonable shift, not as hard as it has been in the past, which I think is good for everybody. So I think that's a good thing. If there is a little silver lining that comes out of that miserable experience that we spent during the lockdown, then I think that's probably something we can at least enjoy from a learning perspective. It certainly helps me from creating a course perspective, because instead of updating 30% of the course, I only have to update about 15% of the course. That's kind of selfish on my part, but it helps me get the content out to you just a little bit faster, which I think is also useful. Let's give other questions of view, see what other questions you might have. We have quite a bit to go through. Let's talk about upgrading or at least renewing our certifications. That's a good one to consider. The question that has been presented also this time from Anonymous. Anonymous asks, if I have my Security Plus, but I take and pass the Network Plus, does that renew the Security Plus, or can only higher level exams renew lower level exams? One of the things that we mentioned earlier in the study group is that you can use continuing education unit credits to renew your certification, but there's a lot of ways you can use to renew. You can take the CertMaster CE online training. That's a number of hours you can spend on that. That renews your certification for 3 years. You could take an exam from a third party. You could take a Microsoft exam, a Cisco exam, and that it counts towards the CEUs that could be applied to renewing your certification. And one of the things that many people will do is take a higher level CompTIA exam to renew their certification. CompTIA has a process for renewal that allows you to do that. Let's go to the CompTIA website. There's a continuing education link at the very top. It takes you right here, and they'll tell you you could do lots of ways to renew. Let's choose step 2, which we're going to choose our renewal path. We can renew with a single activity, multiple activities, and give you renewal options for your certification. Taking an exam would be a single activity, so let's choose that one. We can compare those options. We could take CertMaster CE. We could take a higher level CompTIA cert. We could take non-CompTIA certs. We could take take the exam again. That's a horrible way to renew, by the way, but you can do it. The one that was mentioned in the question was about CompTIA certs, and you can already tell half that question was answered. Higher level CompTIA certifications. But what do they mean by that? What is a higher level CompTIA certification? Let's click to learn more, and they present you with this diagram that maps out for you what certifications renew other certifications. So it's a relatively stacked list here. And if we look at this, the question was specifically about, if we flip back to that, if I have my Security Plus but taken past the Network Plus, does that renew the Security Plus, or can I only take higher level? Well, we know now the answer is only a higher level exam will renew a lower level, but what are they? Now, we talked specifically about Security Plus, so let's click this Security Plus layer, and it says if you take the Security Plus and you pass it, it fully renews the Network Plus and the A Plus. So that we know. Now, what if we had the Security Plus and we took the Network Plus? Well, Network Plus only renews the A Plus. So it's not going to do anything if you take the Security Plus first, then you take the Network Plus second. Now you have two certifications, both with different 3-year renewal periods. One does not renew the other. Now, at that point, if you then went back and renewed your Security Plus for another 3 years, you are renewing the highest level cert. So at that point, it would renew a Network Plus. And if you had A Plus, it would also renew that one as well. So make sure you refer to the CompTIA website for renewals so you know exactly what cert renews what other certifications. That list is being updated sometimes. When they release a new version of a cert, they might change what that certification updates. They recently did that with a couple of them. So make sure you always check back in to see what the differences are between all of those. We do have some time for more questions, so let's keep on our list of here. Let's see what others are available. Let's see. This is a pretty good one since we're in the discussing things about renewing. This is another question from Anonymous who asks, "Hi, Professor. Thank you so much for all you do. Earned my Security Plus cert. I'm working towards Network Plus." Kind of the story we were just talking about. Just wanted to know if the CEs, this continuing education units you offer for watching these episodes of these study groups, could apply towards maintaining my Security Plus cert, or if I can only use security-related continuing education offerings. So now we have to go back to the CompTIA website to be able to answer that one. In this case, we were looking at higher level CompTIA cert. Let's go back one. The one that I wanted to look at was not a single activity. CEUs are multiple activities. So we actually need to go back one more time to renew with multiple activities because we would be doing different types of renewals. And I'm going to choose the option for, I think it's training in higher education. I think it is. So these are, by the way, let's go back one. These are different categories of things that you can do. You get a CompTIA cert, a non-CompTIA cert, training in higher education, IT industry participation, publishing, or work experience. These are all things that can provide you potentially with continuing education units. The one that you are participating in right now is a webinar. That's how CompTIA categorizes it. And they tell you that you can earn them by completing a training course, attending a live webinar, attending a conference, completing a college course, or completing an American Council on Education course. But how many CEUs do you get? If you go here to attend a live webinar, which is what we are doing for Security Plus, you can earn up to 10 CEUs by attending live webinars. I mentioned earlier in that first hour that watching this would give you 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. That's what I was talking about, attending a live webinar. And the reason I give you that categorization is because if you have your Security Plus, you can watch 10 of these and earn 10 CEUs. But as many of you know, to renew your Security Plus, you need 50. 50. That's more than 10. And so as much as I wish you could watch 50 of my live streams and earn enough CEUs. CompTIA won't let you do that. For Security Plus, they'll only let you watch 10. For Network Plus, they'll only let you watch 6. And for A Plus, they'll only let you watch 4. But what webinar qualifies for what certification CEU? Well, fortunately, they have it right here. For a webinar, and scroll. I guess I could have clicked webinar, right? Attend a live webinar. There we go. You can earn 1 CEU for every hour you attend. And it tells you the relevance. It says at least 50% of the course content, the webinar that you're in right now, must relate to one or more of the exam objectives for the certification you're renewing. That's a pretty broad requirement. That means that the webinar, the live stream, the study group that we are doing today would apply to A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, CASP, SICE Plus, Project Plus. I mean, there's so many things we've talked about today deal with networking and hardware and operating systems and Linux and Windows. It almost applies to all of these equally because all they say it has to relate to one or more of the exam objectives. Well, there are hundreds of objectives available in each one of these. We just have to match one of them. We're good. So if you're watching this webinar to renew your A+, you're good. If you're watching this to renew your Network Plus, also good. Watching this to renew your Security Plus, also good. And it might even apply to others as well. So you're good. You are absolutely good to be able to have that renewal there. And that is a good place to go for renewing. Hopefully that gives you a perspective of what renewal options are available to you. I really recommend you read through the renewal section of CompTIA. There's a lot there, but step through it very methodically so that you can get an overview. I also have a video, it's in the YouTube video description of this video, on how to renew your A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus certification in just a few hours. And that focuses on using CertMaster CE. But I also go through all of those other options and I give you advantages and disadvantages to all of those because you might find that other methods of renewal work better for you. So make sure you have a look at those. Another important question from Natalie, who was the one who asked about the movies and the television, and says, all right, if you're a gamer, do you play Warhammer? How about Warhammer 40K? Nope. I'm all over the place. I do very much like MMOs, the massively multiplayer online systems, because most of the time I'm in this room by myself. So whenever I want to relax or have fun, I like to do that with other people around. And online, being in an MMO, there's a lot of other people online that you can talk with, you can communicate with, you can have audio conversations, you can have video conversations. And I find that more interactive and more interesting to me. So most of what I do is that MMO. I've done quite a bit with EVE Online. EVE Online, it's a very involved MMO. It can be. I found it difficult to reinsert myself. I don't have a lot of time for online gaming, so that's another one of those. I do a lot of World of Warcraft. To John's point in the chat room, I do like World of Warcraft. I've been in World of Warcraft and been doing that and intermittently on and off since it was released. But there's other MMOs I like to play around with and just do things with, just to see how they do things. The problem is that I don't have the time to get as deep into those as I could. I would be really into spending time on those and really getting into the theory crafting and going after the highest level, really playing the game, really enjoying the fun part of those MMOs. That's what this is. Whether you watch sports, whether you play online games, whether you participate in sports, whatever you're doing in your spare time, it should be fun. It should be something you enjoy. And in my case, it's something that I would enjoy where other people are also there. So that's what I tend to focus on, is those. Now, occasionally I will get wrapped up in a single player, but because I only have like 1 or 2 hours a night, maybe, to focus on something like that, it's not something that commonly I have time to do. Certainly difficult to get in there. There were a number of people also in the chat making fun of my accent. talking about where I'm from and my kinfolk. Let me tell y'all something. I am not going to sit for that. I am from a small town in North Florida. It is a very rural town. It is a town where people have a heavy Southern accent. How y'all doing? Where y'all going? What's up with y'all? What y'all doing? What you boys doing? Y'all want to go fishing? That's the folks. That's where I grew up. That's my friends and family. That's my cousins. That's my neighbors. That's my folks I grew up with. And that's how we talk. So a lot of people, as they are mentioned in there, we talked a lot in this study group about files. Look, that there file. Copy that file. Rename that file. It's very close to Texas, isn't it? But it's North Florida. It's North Florida. Not quite Alabama. Alabama's like that. Alabama's a little quick. How you doing? From Alabama. But in North Florida, we have a little bit slower drawl. How y'all doing? It's a little bit sweeter. It's a little bit sing-songy. How y'all doing? Good to see you. It's that way. And it really is, to me, to my ears, it's wonderful. It's like music. So I think all of us are sort of that way with where we grew up and where we come from. I came from a small town in North Florida called Monticello, Florida, which is in Jefferson County. Now, you may be thinking back, Jefferson, the President Jefferson in the United States, lived in Virginia, and his dwelling, this place where he lived, was Monticello. Well, we don't say it right. In Florida, we say Monticello. So very often I will hear people use the terms interchangeably, but they are not necessarily. We take a little bit of umbrage. You coming down here talking like that with your Monticello. It's not the way we say it, even though that's how you should say it, but we don't. It's the way it works. So that's where the every once in a while it sneaks out of there. I say y'all, or I talk about the file. That's where that's from. So I appreciate the even mention of that. Like, what is he talking about? Because normally I don't have a bit of a drawl in my voice. I try to be more of that, hello, we're on the internet and let us discuss things in a way that you can understand what I am saying. And I apologize. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. I try to make it work out that way, but it doesn't always work out that way. Let's keep going through this list. Other things that are here. There are some, we've got a couple on this list that are there. This is an interesting one. I was asked this one recently. And it's an interesting one to think about. I'm sure that the answer is relatively obvious, but we can kind of talk to it. Do you know anyone that got a perfect score on their exam? I personally do not. I have seen exam results in the past that were perfect scores. I don't think I've ever scored a perfect score on a certification exam myself, primarily because sometimes I'm trying different things on it. I'm not trying to get a perfect score on an exam. Whenever I take an exam, I'm looking at different parts of the exam. I'm breaking it apart. I'm trying to disconnect all of the different pieces and see how they built the exam and what the questions are like. I approach it from a different perspective. But that is, if you're someone who is trying to work on scoring of the exam, it's interesting to hear about. I always want to know who's the youngest person to ever get a certification. Has anyone ever got a perfect score? Those are interesting, I guess, trivia type things, certainly. But keep in mind that to earn the certification, you only have to get a minimum score. So it doesn't matter if you get a perfect score. It's interesting. I guess that's a good talking point. We can discuss it at a party, I guess, with other technical people. But ultimately, if the score that you need to earn is a 700 and you make a 700, that's all I care about. In fact, I often say, you studied exactly the right amount. You scored exactly the number you needed to earn that 700 and pass that exam. So ultimately, nobody cares what the score is as long as you meet the minimum requirement. And although it's interesting to think that there's got to be somebody out there, statistically, the law of large numbers, there's somebody that, probably more than one person, that has done a perfect score on this exam. I don't know any of them. I don't know if I want to be around some of them folk, but it'd be interesting to hear their story, wouldn't it? how'd you get a perfect score on that exam? You need to tell us how that went down. And certainly would be interesting from a let's break down and see if how you studied is any different than how any of us should study. I have a feeling they studied the same way that all of us do as well. They've got books, they've got videos, they do some labs, they do a lot of Q&A, and they go and take the exam. That's what most of us are doing. It's probably what most of us should be doing to get the best possible score on this exam. Speaking of exams, this is a great follow-up from John, who asks, is it true that if you consistently get the correct answer on the exam, the questions get harder until you miss one? That is a good question. And in fact, there are certification exams out there that change what question they're going to ask next, depending on what your current answer happens to be. That's a bit of a curveball, right? These types of certification exams can ask questions in a number of different ways. For example, if you take a Cisco exam will change the next question depending on how well you're answering the questions so far. So if the exam feels like that particular topic, you got it. You've answered 3 questions about that topic perfectly. We're not going to ask you any more about that. We think you've got it. Let's shift gears into a different set of questions. So there is this change as the exam goes on. In fact, with Cisco, one of the things you'll notice, you can't go backwards. Once you submit the answer, you're only going forwards. And that's because the exam itself is what they call adaptive. It changes depending on what you do. It's not AI. It's not that complicated. That's what we'll get next. The new generation of AI exams. No, it's just figuring out what you've done so far, and it maybe asks different questions going forward. So it is adaptive in how it works. Fortunately, at least up to this point, for the last 15, 20 years, however long I've been doing this, CompTIA has never had an adaptive exam to offer you. All of their exams have been a fixed linear type exam where when you hit start the exam and you get that maximum of 90 questions, let's say they give you 90 questions. Very often you'll get fewer than 90, but let's say there's 90 questions. All 90 of those questions have already been laid out in that exam for you. In fact, you could jump to the last question straight away and work backwards if you wanted to. You could jump to any question at any time on the exam. So you have the ability to skip over questions and come back to questions. You could leave questions blank and come back and answer them later. It's a much more flexible exam type. And every question has already been defined for you when you clicked go. Now it's a random set of questions. So if you failed that set and you come back the next week and you take the exam again, it's pulling up a different set of 90 questions for you. It's a different random set every time. It's a big pool of questions. So, but taking the exam, once you hit go, those are the 90 questions you get. They don't change it up in the middle of the exam or prevent you from going backwards. Fortunately, the CompTIA exams are not adaptive. So that part's good. Thankfully, that's how we do it. Because if you are somebody who is working through your exam and trying to figure out, how do I don't know this one, maybe I'll save it for later. You can do that on CompTIA. Can't do that on Cisco. You have to know it immediately and be able to answer it. So thank you for asking that. That was a good, that comes up every so often, and working through all of that, how the structure of the exam is. I talk a little bit about that structure in both our practice exams book and a little bit more in the exam hacks ebook. It's a good way to know what you're walking into. If you've never taken one of these exams before, it's that fear of the unknown you're always worried about. But it turns out it's not that hard. It's not that fearful, ultimately speaking. Let's see since we talked about certifications, let's talk about this one. It's certifications, but it's money, which is certainly something we should think about from a certification perspective. This question from Anonymous, who asks, for renewals, is the continuing education fees, do they apply to you if you obtain the required CEUs for renewing the certification? I think I can break this down for us. So let's see if we can figure out the details from this. That's one thing we did not talk about with continuing education is how much it costs. There's always a cost involved because there's a process for keeping track of all these CEUs that you have to do. If you are going through the process of renewing with multiple activities and you are collecting CEUs, for instance, today, you could have collected a 1-hour webinar category CEU. If you would like to submit that CEU and collect a bunch of these and use those towards your renewal, there's a cost associated with it. And I think the cost is actually in the first part where options for your certification, is this where it is? Maybe, maybe not. I think it's broken down by exam type, isn't it? And maybe somebody else can give me a little, finding it on the CompTIA website sometimes can be a little bit of a challenge. Learn about the renewal process. Here we go. How to renew, and they have a whole section for just us, continuing education fees. Let's learn more, shall we? So if you are using CEUs, there is an annual maintenance fee, a CE fee for this. For example, if you have your A+ exam and you want to renew the A+, it's $25 a year. Since it's a 3-year renewal cycle, you would need $75 to be able to submit those CEUs and renew your certification. So effectively, it costs you $75 to renew your cert. That's it. They've just broken it down by year, I guess, to make this more complicated. If you are getting your Security Plus, it's $50 a year. It's twice as much. So it's $150 to renew your Security Plus. These are US dollars. But different renewal processes have a different set of costs. For example, if you were to take a higher level CompTIA exam to renew, instead of collecting CEUs, you don't have to pay any CEU fee. Ostensibly because you've just purchased an exam. You've effectively paid for your upgrade, but you're getting a new certification out of the deal. So it's almost like you take a higher level cert, get your renewal for free. If you want to look at it that way. I don't know why they don't do that. That's how they should market it. That's perfect. Or if you are taking the Cert Master CE, the online training where you can step through the renewal process in less than a day and submit it, you don't have to pay any CEU fees because it's built into the cost of that. Let's take an example of that. Let's do numbers, shall we? So let's say that you are, since we're on the A+ study group, you're in your A+, costs you $75 over a 3-year period to renew that. But you may be thinking to yourself, well, what if I don't collect CEUs? What if instead I take the Cert Master CE? So let's go to continuing education. Let's choose your renewal path. That will be a single activity. Let's go to Cert Master CE, which is just there in my head. There we go. Cert Master CE. Let's learn more. And it tells you there's 3 of them, one for A+, one for Network Plus, and one for Security Plus. For A+, you have to have an active A+ cert. Can't renew a certification that's expired. So your certification has to be in that 3-year renewal cycle. And it tells you can't do the same version that you did, 3 years ago. You have to do the newer version or the newest version. They give you the details of that. And they tell you it's $133. Now, if you have 1 day to go before your certification is expired and you're trying to renew it in a 24-hour period, $133, I'm going with that. It is more expensive than $75, but not a lot more expensive than $75, the big picture anyway, depending on how valuable that certification is for you. So Cert Master CE, slightly more expensive, not quite twice the amount, but slightly more expensive, but you can renew in less than a day. And any CE fees that you've paid already, because you thought you were collecting CEUs, you've already paid $150 for your 3 years. Now they can say, oh, wait, we'll deduct that from the price. I guess 75 for A+. I was thinking Security Plus. So you've already paid your $75, they'll deduct that $75. Or if you haven't paid anything, you don't have to pay CEU fees. You just pay the $133, pass this exam, and you're done. Pass this online training. It's more than just an exam. It's online training. So there's the difference in cost. Not a huge difference, but something that might make a difference for you. And that can be pretty useful if you're trying to renew quickly or you're just trying to save a little bit of money. It's another thing you might want to do. You might even decide, well, instead of paying CEU fees, let me go take my Network Plus because that's going to renew my A+. And I wanted to get Network Plus anyway. I got to pay for Network Plus whether I'm renewing A+ or not. So let's go take Network Plus. Perfect. That's what we can do. And I know I'm way past time. We'll do one more question here to figure this one out. This is a great question, by the way, from Anonymous, who says, what can I do with an old desktop? Oh, you could have such fun. You can do great things with old desktops. Now, these days, old is relative, I guess. Do we mean it's 3 years old? Do we mean it's 10 years old? Because there's differences there. There's big differences. We're not going to set up a gaming machine on a 10-year-old desktop. But since you're already in the mode of what can you do with Linux? What can you do with other versions of Windows? I think Linux is probably a good one here. With old desktops, you probably have limited processing power and limited amount of memory. And probably limitations on how much storage might be available, although that might be a little more flexible. I think installing Linux would be a lot of fun because you can install it from scratch, download it, put it on a USB drive, stick it into that machine, boot up with USB, which by itself, by the way, is, I just said it, but it's not that easy. It's a little more complicated than simply copying it over and putting the USB key in. But once you read through the documentation on how to do that, and there's a lot of great utilities on the internet that can help you with this, installing Linux from a USB is relatively easy to do. Get that installed, put it on the USB drive, plug it in, boot up the machine, and install Linux. And what's great, because it's an old system and it's a standalone system, it's not a VM, you don't have any worries that you're going to break anything with your current machine. You don't want to mess up your current laptop. Maybe you're concerned about doing that with a VM, and I can appreciate that. You probably can't, though. But still, having that separate machine, now maybe we make a web server out of it. Let's make a web server and a database server out of that one device. We'll turn it into our own web services. That's a great project. Install MySQL on it and install Apache HTTPS or HTTPD. Those are two great, very common applications to install on a machine. It's your LAMP machine. That's what that is. So if you're ever trying to figure out what you can do with it, Linux is probably the answer. Probably because what would be fun, not just a web server, maybe not a web server, let's make a firewall out of it. Does it have a couple of network cards in it? Or just one network card that we can then kind of virtualize in the firewall software itself? That'd be something fun to do. Load up, some type of firewall, not just Firewall D or one of the built-in Linux firewalls. I mean, a relatively large-scale firewall, a free and open source firewall system. There's lots of different options to choose from for free and open source firewalls. Free open source firewall. Let's go to the Google machine. And I think there's a couple of great choices here. We'll go to one of these really bad, look at this list of firewalls that you could look at, websites, but it gives you some at least good ideas like Untangle NG. What other ones have I used? Smoothwall I've heard people using. Some of these are no longer available, by the way, as I flip through these. And pfSense, number one, I'd probably put that as number one too. That's the one I would start with, really, pfSense. So load up pfSense, which you can also integrate with something like Snort, which is an IPS. So now you have a firewall and an IPS. Maybe try that as your firewall. See what type of reports you can get out of it. That's a fun weekend project, by the way, and it's something that would give you more knowledge of Linux and understanding of how to set up some of these applications in Linux. You're going to run into problems. So troubleshooting at the Linux command prompt is always a lot of fun, and it's something that can teach you about how Linux operates kind of under the surface. And now you got a firewall out of the deal, so maybe you get some great firewall reports. This, by the way, would be a great project to describe when you are in your first job interview and somebody talks to you about, tell us about a problem you ran into and how you solved it. Tell us about an issue you found in your troubleshooting process around that. Trust me, when you install pfSense, you've got 10 of those. You've got 10 problems you ran into that you had to solve. So now you've got a great story, because that's really what interviews are about. Interviews are about you telling stories. You need a bunch of stories in your pocket, and this is a great place to get a story from. Oh, I had an old machine sitting around. I thought, I need a new firewall. Let's install pfSense. They're going to know what that is, people you talk to. And you can say, I installed this, but I ran into this problem with the storage drive I was using. And the partitions that were there, I had to remove everything, then reinstall, or I had to swap it out for a different drive, or I installed an SSD instead of the spinning hard drive, so I'd have a little bit faster response time. These are great things to talk about during the interview. And then I installed it, plugged it into my internet connection. The information I found was ridiculous. You should have seen the number of attacks that were inbound on my internet connection on the outside that simply didn't get through because my firewall's in place. Oh, and I have a report of those. Here's the report. If somebody did that in an interview, I'd be wanting to hire them. Let's get you on the list. You're making the short list on that one. So there's some really good stuff there. So either do a firewall with an IPS, maybe security is your thing, or maybe do a web server and a database server, which is really a good overall IT thing to do. Everybody needs to know about web server technologies, SQL technologies, and things you can do with it, and then how to monitor them, how to use the top command. We talked about that today. How to copy some of these files around and change the directories and delete things. We talked about that today. So I think that would be a great way to take advantage of those older systems. Don't throw them out. We could do something with them. We can learn from them. We can create with them. And I think that also makes you smarter, makes you better, makes you more, have more stories available for your interviews. It makes you a better technologist. And ultimately, this is what we do all the time in our industry. We're constantly in a lab. We're constantly installing software. We're constantly trying new things. This would be a way for you to do it prior to actually getting into the door of a formal job posting, a job position. And when you're first week on the job and they say, well, we got a new version of Apache web server coming down. We need to put that in a lab and test it. Like, I'm your person. I can do that one. I have done that before. Let's go do it. We'll go in the lab, we'll install it, we'll try it out and see what's new and what's different with that version. This is something we do all the time. And when you talk about the change control process, you're effectively doing the first part of that. Let's test it and see how it's working. Plus, you're learning a lot about Linux. You're learning about web technologies. You're learning about configurations for SQL database servers. You're learning about firewalls. You're learning about firewall rules. You're learning about IPS and IDS. You're learning about how to interpret the information that you're seeing coming through those network connections. You're undoubtedly going to be learning about networks, and a lot of it. That's the way you do it, is you get your hands dirty and get in there with all of those. Hopefully that's given you some things to think about. I think that should give us also a good place to think about things. We've got a lot more to do here. We are done for today. However, we've run out of time. I'm getting the hook. So they're pulling me off of the live stream. However, we'll still be over in our Discord. Make sure you come visit us on the Professor Messer Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. That's where I'll be the rest of the day. I have a lot of things to do there. There's also another live stream next week on, I believe, Thursday of next week. We are doing, a week from today, is our Network Plus study group. If you like networking, that will be a good one. And then the week after that is our Security Plus study group. ramping up for the Thanksgiving holiday here in the United States. Hopefully that's given you some ideas on things you can do over the next week or so. And I'd love to hear what you managed to do with the old machines that you have sitting around. Leave a comment in this video and tell us what you're doing with it. I'd love to get your feedback of things that might be interesting that I might want to try on my old machines. Might be something to do myself. Thank you so much for joining us. We do enjoy doing these live streams. It's always fun to have you here. Thank you, chat room, for being here. If you're watching this in the replay, thank you so much for your support. We'd love it if you could give us a thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to our channel, we'd invite you to come over to professormesser.com/YouTube and give us a subscription as well. Thanks for joining us. And we'll see you next time on the A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.